At my 73rd birthday dinner, my son placed a silver cloche in front of me. I thought it was a steak. I thought for once he was showing me respect. But when he lifted the lid, the smell hit me first. It wasn't ribeye. It was wet, chunky dog food. He laughed and said, "This is what freeloaders eat, old man high protein, good for useless people." 60 guests laughed with him. His wife filmed it for her followers. They thought they were breaking a helpless old man. They didn't know they were waking up a sleeping giant who owned the very floor they were standing on. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to show someone that kindness is not weakness. The restaurant was called The Elite. It was fitting because everything about it was pretentious, overpriced, and hollow, just like my son Mason. It was located in the trendy district of Atlanta, a place where rent cost more than I used to make in a year as an army cook. Mason was the director here. He walked around the dining room like he was Caesar in a polyester suit, snapping his fingers at waiters and checking his reflection in the silverware. I sat at the head of the long table wearing my Sunday best. It was a brown suit I had bought 10 years ago at a discount store. It was clean and pressed, but the cuffs were a little frayed. Next to the designer dresses and Italian silk suits surrounding me, I looked like a smudge of dirt on a white sheet. I didn't mind. I have never cared about clothes. I care about character. And looking around this table, I saw a lot of expensive fabric covering up very cheap souls. Mason had invited everyone, his business partners, his investors, his friends from the club. 60 people. He told me it was to celebrate my 73rd birthday. He told me he wanted to honor his father. I should have known better. Mason didn't know the meaning of the word honor. He stood up, clinking his fork against his champagne glass. The room went quiet. "Attention, everyone." Mason boomed. His voice was loud, too loud. He had that glint in his eye, the one he got when he was about to pull a stunt. "I want to propose a toast," he said, raising his glass. "To my father, Cyrus King." He gestured at me. I stayed seated, holding my water glass. I didn't drink alcohol. I needed my mind sharp. 73 years old, Mason continued. Can you believe it? And look at him. He looks like he could still peel 1,000 potatoes before dawn. A ripple of laughter went through the room. "That is what he did, you know," Mason said, leaning in like he was sharing a secret. "My dad was a cook in the army. He spent 20 years making slop for grunts, and then another 20 working as a janitor. He is a simple man, a man of the earth." He smiled, a shark smile. "And now he lives with me, in my guest house." Guest. Because let us be honest, what else is he going to do? Social Security doesn't pay for a lifestyle like this, right, Dad? He looked at me, waiting for me to look down, waiting for me to be ashamed. I looked right back at him. "I pay my way, Mason," I said quietly. "My pension covers my needs." Mason laughed. "Your pension," he scoffed. "Dad, your pension wouldn't cover the valet parking at this place." No. You live with me because I am a good son, because I am generous, because I carry the burden of family. I saw Chloe, my daughter-in-law, sitting to my right. She was holding her phone up, recording everything. She was a beautiful woman on the outside, but inside she was rotting. She winked at the camera. Living with in-laws, she whispered to her followers, #charity work. I felt a tightening in my chest. It wasn't pain, it was disappointment. Deep, crushing disappointment. I had raised Mason to be better than this. I had worked 3 jobs so he wouldn't have to. I had taught him to respect his elders, to value hard work. But somewhere along the way he had lost himself. He had fallen in love with the appearance of success instead of the work it took to achieve it. He didn't know that the guest house I lived in was actually the main house on the property deed. He didn't know that the lifestyle he bragged about was funded by loans I had secretly guaranteed through my shell companies. He didn't know that King Foods Distribution, the company that supplied every steak and every potato in this restaurant, was mine. He thought I was a freeloader. "Dinner is served," Mason announced, clapping his hands. Waiters swarmed the table, placing plates of filet mignon and lobster in front of the guests. The smell was delicious, rich, savory, expensive. But they didn't put a plate in front of me. I sat there, my hands folded on the tablecloth, waiting. Maybe they forgot. Maybe it was coming. Mason walked over to me. He was holding a silver cloche, a covered dish usually reserved for the chef's special. And for the birthday boy, he said, his voice dripping with fake sweetness, I have prepared something special, something that matches your contribution to this family. The room went silent. Everyone was watching. The investors looked curious. Chloe moved her phone closer, getting the perfect angle. Mason placed the dish in front of me. You always say you like simple things, Dad, he said. You always say you don't need fancy food. So I went back to basics for you. He lifted the lid. There was no steam. There was no garnish. In the center of the fine china plate was a mound of brown, wet, lumpy meat. The smell hit me instantly. It was unmistakable. It smelled of rendered fat and processed grain. It was dog food, high-quality canned dog food. I stared at it. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. This is what freeloaders eat, Old Man Mason said, loud enough for the back of the room to hear. It is high protein, good for your joints. And best of all, it is free. Just like your rent, just like your clothes, just like your life. The silence in the room shattered. It started with a giggle from Chloe, then a chuckle from one of the investors. Then the whole room erupted in laughter. 60 people. 60 wealthy, educated people laughing at an old man being served dog food by his own son. I looked at the faces around me. I saw cruelty. I saw arrogance. I saw a group of people who thought money gave them the right to be monsters. Look at his face. Chloe laughed, zooming in. He looks like he is going to cry. Aw, poor puppy. Eat up, Dad, Mason said, gesturing to the plate. Don't be rude. There are starving kids in Africa who would love that. He patted my shoulder. I'm just teaching you a lesson, old-timer. You need to know your place. You are the past, I am the future, and in my house you eat what I give you. My place. I looked at the dog food. Then I looked at my hands. These hands had peeled potatoes, yes. They had scrubbed floors, yes. But these hands had also signed the contracts that built the supply chain for the entire Southeast region. These hands had shook hands with governors. These hands had held his mother while she died and promised her I would take care of our boy. I had kept that promise. I had protected him from the truth. I had protected him from failure. But I had failed to protect him from himself. I realized then that I had made a mistake, a terrible mistake. I had thought that by hiding my wealth I was teaching him humility. But all I had done was feed his arrogance. I had let him believe he was superior because I didn't want him to feel inferior to my success. Well, the lesson was over. I slowly pushed my chair back. The scraping sound cut through the laughter. I stood up. I didn't hunch. I didn't tremble. I stood to my full height of 6'2", the height of a soldier. The laughter died down. People looked at me. They saw something into my eyes that they hadn't expected. They expected shame. They saw steel. I picked up the plate. The dog food slid around on the china. You think this is funny, Mason? I asked. My voice was low, calm, and steady. It wasn't the voice of a father scolding a child. It was the voice of a commander addressing a traitor. Mason stopped smiling. He looked a little unsure. It is a joke, Dad, relax, he said. Can't you take a joke? A joke, I repeated. I looked at the plate. Then I looked at the floor, the expensive imported marble floor that Mason was so proud of. I turned the plate over. Splat! The mound of dog food hit the floor with a wet, heavy sound. It splattered onto Mason's Italian shoes. He jumped back. Hey, he shouted. Are you crazy? These are Ferragamo. I dropped the plate. It shattered into a dozen pieces. Crash. The sound echoed in the silent restaurant. You want to treat me like a dog? I said, stepping over the mess, getting right in his face. Then you better be careful, son, because dogs bite. Mason's face turned red. He looked at his guests. He looked at the mess. He looked at me. Get out, he hissed. Get out of my restaurant. You are embarrassing me. Your restaurant, I asked. I looked around the room. I looked at the walls I had paid for. I looked at the kitchen I had stocked. We will see about that, I said. I turned to Chloe. She was still filming, but her mouth was open in shock. Make sure you post that, I said. I want everyone to see it. I want everyone to know exactly who Mason King is. I turned and walked toward the door. Dad, wait! Mason called out, but it wasn't an apology. It was a threat. If you walk out that door, don't come back. Do not come back to my house. You are done. You are on the street. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I walked out of the dining room. I walked through the kitchen. The staff stopped working. The chefs, the dishwashers, the servers. They knew me. Not as the owner, but as the old man who came in the back door to deliver vegetables when the trucks were late. They knew me as the man who tipped them $100 bills on Christmas when Mason wasn't looking. "Mr. King," the head chef whispered. I stopped. I looked at him. "Keep cooking, chef," I said. "The guests are hungry." I walked out the back door into the alley. The cool night air felt good on my face. I took a deep breath. I smelled the garbage from the dumpsters. It smelled better than the perfume inside that restaurant. I walked to the parking lot. My old Ford truck was parked in the corner away from the Bentleys and the Mercedes. I climbed in. I sat there for a moment in the dark cab. My son had just served me dog food. My son had just thrown me away. He thought he had broken me. He didn't know he had just set me free. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I dialed a number. It rang once. "Chen here," a voice answered. "Mr. Chen," I said. "It is Cyrus." "Cyrus," my old friend Chen said warmly. "Happy birthday. How is the party?" "The party is over," I said. There was a pause. Chen knew me. He heard the tone in my voice. "What do you need?" Chen asked. "I need you to make a call," I said. "Name it." "Call the warehouse," I said. "Cancel the morning delivery for the elite." "Cancel it?" Chen asked, surprised. "But Cyrus, that is your son's place. It is his biggest weekend. He has 3 wedding receptions booked." "I know," I said. "Cancel it. Cancel the meat, cancel the produce, cancel the dairy. I want that kitchen empty by noon tomorrow." There was a silence on the line. Then Chen spoke. "Consider it done. Anything else?" "Yes," I said. "Call the bank. Tell them to activate the clause on the building lease." "The eviction clause?" Chen asked. "The eviction clause," I said. I started the engine. "He wanted to feed me like an animal," I said. "Now he is going to find out who feeds him." I hung up the phone. I pulled out of the parking lot. I was 73 years old. I had no place to sleep tonight. But I had a war to fight. And for the first time in years, I felt alive. The fluorescent lights of the garage flickered overhead, casting long, jumping shadows against the concrete walls. It was 2 a.m, but I wasn't sleeping. I was packing. My old leather suitcase, the one I had carried since my army days, was open on the workbench. It smelled of motor oil and memories. I folded my few shirts, my work pants, and placed them inside with a precision that only decades of military discipline could teach. I didn't have much. A few photos of Rosa, my Bible, my chef's knife roll, the one I had used to cook for generals and presidents, though my son thought I only knew how to make slop. I heard the heavy oak front door slam upstairs. The sound reverberated through the floorboards like a gunshot. They were home, Mason and Chloe, drunk on champagne and arrogance. I could hear their footsteps, heavy and careless, thudding above my head. Then the muffled sound of voices arguing, laughing. They were probably celebrating the humiliation of the old man, celebrating their victory over the freeloader. I kept packing. I didn't hurry. I didn't hide. I had nothing to hide anymore. The door to the garage swung open. Chloe stood there, swaying slightly in her designer heels. She was still wearing the dress from the party, a shimmering silver thing that cost more than my first house. She held a half-empty bottle of wine in one hand and her phone in the other. Mason was right behind her, his tie undone, his face flushed. "Well, well, well," Chloe slurred, leaning against the doorframe. "Look who is awake. The birthday boy." "Are you running away, Cyrus?" I didn't look up. I carefully placed my shaving kit into the corner of the suitcase. "I am leaving Chloe," I said, my voice steady. "Just like you wanted." She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound that grated on my nerves. "Leaving. To go where? Under a bridge, or maybe to a shelter. Do they let you bring your own dog food there? Or do they serve it fresh?" Mason chuckled behind her. "Let him go, babe," he said. "He is just throwing a tantrum. He will be back by morning when he gets hungry. He has nowhere else to go." I zipped up the suitcase. The sound was loud in the quiet garage. I turned to face them. "I have plenty of places to go, Mason," I said. "Places where I am respected, places where people don't serve their father's garbage on a silver platter." Chloe rolled her eyes. "Oh, please," she said, stepping into the garage. "Spare us the drama. You are a broke old man, Cyrus. You have nothing. You are nothing without us. We gave you a roof. We gave you food. And this is how you repay us. by walking out in the middle of the night like a thief. I picked up the suitcase. It was heavy, but I didn't let it show. I paid for this roof, Chloe, I said quietly. Every shingle, every brick. I paid for the food, I paid for the cars, I paid for everything. Liar, she spat. Mason pays for everything. He is the CEO. You are just a leech. She looked around the garage. Her eyes landed on my truck. It was a 2022 Ford F-250 parked in the corner. It looked like a work truck, dented and scratched, but under the hood it was a beast. I had bought it cash 2 years ago, but I had put it in Mason's name. I wanted to help his credit score. I wanted him to feel like a man. "Where do you think you are going with that?" she asked, pointing a manicured finger at the truck. "I am taking my truck," I said. "Your truck." She laughed. "That truck is in Mason's name. I checked the registration. It belongs to him, just like this house, just like everything else." She turned to Mason. "Tell him, baby. Tell him he can't take the truck." Mason stepped forward. He looked uncomfortable, but he wouldn't back down in front of her. "She is right, Dad," he said, avoiding my eyes. "The title is in my name. Technically, it is my property. If you take it, I could report it stolen." I stared at him. My son, the boy I had taught to drive in a truck just like that one, the boy I had bought his first bicycle for. He was standing there threatening to call the police on his own father for taking a vehicle I had paid for. "You would do that?" I asked. "You would report your father for theft?" I have to protect my assets," Mason stammered. "Insurance, liability, you know how it is." "Protect your assets," I repeated. I looked at the truck. I loved that truck. It was my freedom. It was my independence. But looking at Mason now, I realized something. He didn't want the truck. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted to strip me of everything. He wanted to leave me with nothing but the clothes on my back so I would have to crawl back to him, so I would have to beg. He wanted to break me. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the keys. The metal felt cold in my hand. I looked at the truck one last time, then I looked at Mason. "You want the truck?" I asked. "It is mine," he said, puffing out his chest. "Fine," I said. I threw the keys. I didn't toss them. I threw them. Hard. They flew through the air, silver bullets in the dim light. They hit Mason square in the chest. The metal struck his breastbone with a dull thud. "Oof," he grunted, stumbling back. He caught the keys before they hit the floor. He looked at them, then at me, his face red with anger. "Are you crazy?" he shouted. "You could have hurt me." I didn't say anything. I just picked up my suitcase. "I don't need the truck." "Mason," I said, my voice cold as ice. "I don't need your charity. I don't need your house." I walked toward the garage door. "Where are you going?" Chloe screeched, blocking my path. "You can't just walk out. It is raining. You will die out there." "Let me pass, Chloe," I said. She didn't move. She stood there swaying, enjoying her power. "Beg," she whispered. "Beg us to let you stay. Apologize for the mess at the restaurant. Admit you are a loser. And maybe we will let you sleep on the floor tonight." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had poisoned my son against me. "I don't beg," I said. I stepped around her. She tried to grab my arm, but I shook her off. She stumbled and almost fell. "Hey," Mason yelled, starting forward. "Don't touch her." I turned back at the threshold of the garage. The night air was pouring in cold and wet. "I am leaving Mason," I said. "And I am taking my dignity with me. That is something you never had. I have everything," he screamed. "I have the money. I have the house. I have the business. You have nothing. You are a nobody." I smiled. It was the same smile I had given him at the restaurant. The wolf smile. "Enjoy it, son," I said. "Enjoy every bit of it. While it lasts." I walked out into the rain. I heard them shouting behind me. I heard Chloe cursing. I heard Mason revving the engine of the truck, probably just to prove he could. I didn't look back. I walked down the long driveway, my suitcase heavy in my hand. The rain soaked my suit. The wind cut through my thin shirt. But I didn't feel cold. I felt fire. I walked to the main road. I walked for a mile until I reached the bus stop. I sat on the wet bench and waited. I was 73 years old. I had no car. I had no home. But I had a phone. And I had a number. I pulled out my old flip phone. I dialed. It rang 3 times. "Chen here," a sleepy voice answered. "Mr. Chen," I said. "It is Cyrus." Cyrus Chen said, waking up instantly. "Where are you?" I am at the bus stop on Peach Street, I said. I am coming, Chen said. Don't move. I hung up. I sat there in the rain watching the headlights of passing cars. Mason thought he had won. He thought he had taken my truck, my home, my pride. He didn't know that the truck was the least of his problems. He didn't know that by taking the keys he had just unlocked his own destruction. Because that truck wasn't just a vehicle. It was the only thing holding back the flood. And now, the dam was broken. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Atlanta looked like a graveyard for industry. The brick facade was crumbling, covered in graffiti, and the windows were boarded up with plywood. To anyone driving past, it was just another eyesore, a relic of a time when manufacturing mattered. But to me, it was the nerve center. I pulled my old Ford truck around the back, navigating the potholes by memory. The security gate looked rusted shut, but when I pressed a button on my keychain, it slid open silently, revealing a pristine loading dock and a fleet of refrigerated trucks that gleamed under the floodlights. This was King Foods distribution. Most people thought the food in Atlanta just appeared on their plates by magic. They didn't think about the logistics, the cold chain, the contracts. They didn't know that almost every high-end restaurant in the city, including the elite, relied on my trucks to deliver their prime cuts and their organic vegetables before dawn. I parked my truck next to a Rolls-Royce that belonged to my operations manager, Mr. Chen. I got out my duffel bag, heavy on my shoulder. The warehouse interior was a hive of activity. Forklifts buzzed back and forth carrying pallets of goods. Men in cold weather gear moved with purpose, shouting orders over the hum of the industrial freezers. The air smelled of fresh produce and cold steel. "Mr. King," a voice called out. I turned to see Chen walking toward me. He was a short man with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. He was wearing a suit, but he had a hairnet in his hand ready to inspect the line. "Mr. Chen," I said, shaking his hand. "You are late," he said, checking his watch. "Usually you are here by 2 a.m. to check the invoices." "I had a family matter," I said. Chen looked at my duffel bag. He looked at my tired eyes. He knew me better than my own son did. "Is it Mason?" he asked quietly. "It is Mason," I said. "He kicked me out, Chen. Tonight. On my birthday." Chen's face hardened. He didn't say anything for a moment. He just nodded slowly. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I walked over to the main control desk. A bank of monitors showed the GPS location of every truck in the fleet. I saw truck 402. It was loaded and scheduled for a 4 a.m. delivery to the elite. It was carrying Wagyu beef truffles and crates of imported wine. $50,000 of inventory. I pointed to the screen. "Stop that truck," I said. Chen looked at the screen. "That is Mason's delivery," he said. If we stop it, he has nothing to serve," I finished. Chen looked at me. "Are you sure, Cyrus? That is a lot of revenue. And it is war." He served me dog food. "Chen," I said, my voice cold, "in front of 60 people. He called me a freeloader." Chen's eyes went wide. "Dog food," he whispered. "Cut him off," I said. Chen picked up the radio. "Dispatch, this is Chen. Reroute truck 402. Copy that, Mr. Chen." "Rerouting. Where to?" "Send it to the shelter on 4th Street, I said, leaning into the mic. "Tell them it is a donation. Tell them to eat like kings tonight. Copy that." Rerouting to shelter. I watched the dot on the screen change direction. It turned away from the trendy district and headed toward the slums. "That is just the beginning," I said. I pulled a list from my pocket. It was a list of Mason's suppliers, the ones he used for specialty items, the ones he thought were independent. They weren't. I owned them all. Through shell companies, through partnerships, through handshake deals I made 40 years ago. "Call the bakery," I said. "Call the seafood guy. Call the linen service. Tell them King Foods is exercising the exclusivity clause," I said. "Tell them if they deliver to the elite, they lose our contract." Chen whistled. "You are shutting him down completely. I am teaching him about supply and chain," I said. "He thinks he is a chef. He thinks he is a businessman. But he is just a consumer. He doesn't know where the food comes from. He's about to find out." I walked to the office at the back of the warehouse. It was small, modest. It had a cot in the corner where I used to sleep when the business was young and I couldn't afford to go home. I put my bag down. "I am staying here for a while, Chen," I said. "This is your home, Cyrus," Chen said. I sat in the chair. I looked at the monitors. I watched my empire work. It was a beautiful machine. Efficient, powerful, quiet, just like me. I closed my eyes. I could still smell the dog food. I could still hear the laughter. Mason thought I was powerless. He thought I was a burden. He didn't know that I was the gravity that held his world together, and I had just let go. I slept for 2 hours. It was the best sleep I had in years. I woke up at 6 a.m. The sun was coming up over the loading dock. The trucks were returning empty. My phone didn't ring. Mason didn't know I had this number, but I knew what was happening. I turned on the audio feed from the Elite's kitchen. I had installed the security system there 2 years ago as a gift to help him manage his staff. I listened. It was chaos. "Where is the truck?" the head chef was screaming. "I have a prep team standing here with nothing to cut. We have a lunch service in 5 hours. "I don't know," the sous chef yelled back. I called the dispatch. They said the account is suspended. "Suspended," the chef roared. "Call Mason. Call him now." I smiled. I poured myself a cup of coffee. The phone rang in Mason's bedroom. I could imagine him waking up hungover next to Chloe. I could imagine him reaching for the phone annoyed. "Hello," he would say, his voice thick with sleep. "Boss," the chef shouted. "We have a problem. A big problem." "What is it?" Mason snapped. "I am sleeping." "The food," the chef said. "It is not here. No meat, no veg, no bread. The trucks didn't come." "What do you mean they didn't come?" Mason asked, sitting up. "I mean the kitchen is empty, boss. We have nothing. We cannot open." "Call the backup suppliers," Mason yelled. "Call Cisco. Call anyone." I did, the chef said, his voice trembling. They all said no. They said they are out of stock. Or they said their trucks are full. It is like we have been blacklisted, boss." "Blacklisted," Mason whispered. "Who would do that?" I took a sip of coffee. I pictured Mason's face, the realization dawning on him, the fear. He looked at the empty spot on the nightstand where he had thrown his keys at me. He looked at the door where I had walked out. He thought about the dog food. "No," he would whisper. "It can't be. He is just a janitor." But the doubt would be there, a tiny seed of terror planted in his gut. He would get dressed. He would run to the restaurant. He would see the empty wok and freezers. He would see the staff standing around with nothing to do, and he would know. The old man wasn't just a janitor, he was the supply chain, and the chain was broken. The kitchen at the Elite was usually a symphony of clanging pots, sizzling pans, and shouted orders. But at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning, it was a graveyard. The stainless steel counters were clean, the walk-in freezers were echoing, and the 60 staff members were standing around looking at their phones. Mason stood in the center of the room, his tie askew, his face shining with sweat. He was screaming into his cell phone. "What do you mean you can't deliver?" he yelled. "We have a contract. I will sue you. I will ruin you." He listened for a second, then threw the phone against the wall. It shattered. They all said no. He whispered. Every single one. The meat guy, the produce guy, even the bread guy. They all have logistical issues. Chloe stormed into the kitchen. She was wearing a tracksuit and sunglasses, trying to hide the fact that she had been crying. Her phone was in her hand. "Mason," she hissed. "The bride's mother just called. She heard a rumor that we don't have food. She is threatening to cancel the reception. That is a $50,000 booking, Mason. If we lose it, we can't make payroll." "I am trying." "Tiff," Mason snapped. "I am calling everyone. Cisco, U.S. Foods, even the local farmers market. Nobody will touch us. It is like we have the plague." "It is your father," Chloe said. Her voice was venomous. "He did this. He knows people. He worked in kitchens for 20 years. He must have called in some favors. He is sabotaging us because he is petty." Mason looked at her. His eyes were wide with panic. "Dad," he asked. "Dad is a janitor, Chloe. He doesn't have this kind of pull. He can't shut down the entire city's supply chain." "He is vindictive," she insisted. "He is trying to teach us a lesson. Call him. Scream at him. Tell him if he doesn't fix this, we are going to the police." Mason nodded. He reached for his shattered phone, realized it was broken, and grabbed Chloe's. He dialed my number. I was sitting in the conference room of a law firm on the 42nd floor of the Bank of America Tower. The room smelled of leather and money. Across from me sat Mr. Henderson, the owner of the building that housed the elite. He was a nervous man with a comb-over and a bad suit. He was sweating because he knew who I really was. I watched my phone buzz on the table. "Son," I let it ring. Mr. King Henderson said, his voice shaking. "Are you sure about this? The lease, it has 5 years left." "The lease has a clause," I said, my voice calm. "Clause 12. Bankruptcy or insolvency of the tenant allows for immediate termination." "But they aren't insolvent," Henderson said. "They are late, yes, but they always pay eventually." "They won't pay this month," I said. "They have no food, they have no revenue, and by noon they will have no reputation." I slid a check across the table. It was a cashier's check for $5 million. "This is the purchase price for the building," I said, "plus a 10% premium for your trouble, and for your silence." Henderson looked at the check. He looked at me. He picked up the pen. I bought the building. I bought the ground under my son's feet. My phone stopped ringing. Then it started again. A text message this time. "Pick up the phone, old man. I know you are doing this. You are going to pay for this. Fix it, or I swear to God I will burn your stuff." I smiled. He was still threatening me. He still thought he had leverage. He didn't know that the only leverage he had was the gravity pulling him down. Back at the restaurant, the chaos was escalating. The bride's mother had arrived. She was a woman named Mrs. Vanderbilt, a socialite with a voice like a foghorn. She was standing in the lobby, screaming at Chloe. "This is unacceptable," she yelled. "My daughter is getting married in 4 hours. We have 300 guests coming, and you are telling me you don't have hors d'oeuvres." "We are working on it, Mrs. Vanderbilt," Chloe stammered. "We had a supply chain issue. A truck broke down." "I don't care about your trucks," Mrs. Vanderbilt shouted. "I care about the lobster bisque I paid for. If I don't see food on these tables by 2 o'clock, I am going to sue you for breach of contract. I am going to sue you for emotional distress, and I am going to tell everyone at the country club that the elite is a fraud." She stormed out. Chloe turned to the staff. "Do something," she screamed. "Go to the grocery store. Buy chicken. Buy pasta. Buy anything. We have to serve something." The head chef shook his head. "We can't serve grocery store chicken at a $200 a plate wedding, Mrs. King. It is a health code violation, and we don't have the cash to buy enough for 300 people. The company card is declined, remember." "Get out!" Chloe shrieked. "You are all fired. Get out of my restaurant." The staff looked at each other. They took off their aprons. They walked out. 60 people, the heart of the business, walking out the door. Mason sat on the floor of the lobby. He had his head in his hands. He was rocking back and forth. "It is over," he whispered. "It is all over." "Not yet, Mason," I thought, watching the security feed on my tablet. "Not yet. You still have a landlord to deal with, and he is on his way." I signed the final papers. I shook Henderson's hand. "Pleasure doing business with you," I said. I walked out of the office. I took the elevator down. My driver was waiting. "To the restaurant, James," I said. It was time to collect the rent. Monday morning hit Mason like a freight train. The restaurant was closed. The staff was gone. The reviews online were plummeting faster than a stone in a well. And now there was a man in a cheap suit standing in the lobby of the elite, holding a clipboard and looking very official. "Can I help you?" Mason asked, his voice strained. He was sitting on a velvet bench nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee from the machine in the break room because he couldn't afford Starbucks. "Are you Mason King?" the man asked. "I am," Mason said, standing up. "I'm the owner." "The tenant," the man corrected him. He handed Mason a thick envelope. "This is a notice of lease modification and rent adjustment, effective immediately." Mason frowned. He ripped open the envelope. He scanned the document. His eyes bulged. This says the rent is increasing to $50,000 a month," he sputtered. "That's triple what we pay now. And it says, immediate payment due or vacate in 48 hours. "That's correct," the man said. "You can't do this," Mason shouted. "I have a lease. I have rights." "Your lease expired yesterday," the man said calmly. Clause 14B, insolvency triggers automatic expiration. The new owner has exercised their right to renegotiate. "New owner?" Mason asked. "What new owner? Mr. Henderson owns this building." "Mr. Henderson sold the building on Saturday," the man said, "to King Properties, LLC." Mason froze. King Properties. Who owns King Properties? He whispered. You can discuss that with the landlord, the man said. He's waiting for you in the penthouse office, top floor, now. The man turned and walked away. Mason stood there holding the eviction notice. His hands were shaking. King Properties. It had to be a coincidence. It had to be. He took the elevator up. The penthouse office of the building had always been empty, a dusty space Henderson used for storage. But when the doors opened, Mason gasped. The dust was gone. The old boxes were gone. The space had been transformed. Modern furniture, sleek glass walls. A receptionist desk staffed by a woman who looked like she cost more per hour than Mason made in a week. Mr. Sterling, she said without looking up. Go right in. He's expecting you. Mason walked toward the double doors at the end of the hall. He pushed them open. The office was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city he thought he owned. And sitting behind a massive desk carved from black oak, swiveling slowly to face him, was a man in a bespoke suit. It was me. I wasn't wearing my work clothes. I was wearing a navy blue suit that cost $6,000. My shoes were polished. My hair was trimmed. I looked like a titan of industry. Hello, Mason, I said. My voice was calm, deep, and filled with power. Mason stopped dead in his tracks. He blinked. He rubbed his eyes. Dad, he whispered. Sit down, I said, pointing to the chair opposite me. He didn't move. He stared at the suit. He stared at the office. He stared at the nameplate on my desk, Cyrus King, CEO. What is this? He stammered. You're a janitor. You're broke. I was never broke, Mason, I said. I was frugal. There's a difference. I picked up a file from my desk. You received the notice? I asked. Mason looked at the paper in his hand. This says you own the building. I do, I said. I bought it on Saturday. Cash. Cash, he squeaked. $5 million. Where did you get $5 million? From my other pocket, I said. I leaned forward. I looked him in the eye, the same eyes that had looked at me with such contempt 2 days ago. So, I said, let's talk business. The rent is $50,000, due today. Can you pay it? $50,000, Mason yelled. That's extortion. No restaurant in the city pays that. This isn't just any restaurant, I said. This is the elite, the place where you serve dog food to your father. Premium location comes with a premium price. Mason flinched. The memory of the dinner hung in the air between us. You're doing this because of the dinner, he said. You're doing this for revenge. I'm doing this because I'm a businessman, I said. And you, Mason, are a bad tenant. You don't pay your suppliers, you treat your staff like dirt, and you insult the landlord. I opened the file. I've looked at your books, I said. Or rather, the books my accountant reconstructed. You're bleeding money. You're skimming off the top to pay for your wife's shopping addiction. You're 3 months behind on payroll taxes. That's private information, Mason shouted. It's my information now, I said. I own the building. I own the debt. I own you. Mason stood up. He slammed his hand on the desk. I'm not paying you a dime, he spat. I'm leaving. I'll take my business somewhere else. Go ahead, I said. But remember, you signed a personal guarantee on the lease. If you break it, I come after your house, your car, your future earnings. I don't have a personal guarantee, Mason yelled. I signed as the corporation. I slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was the original lease. Look at the bottom, Mason, I said. That tiny print you never read, that's a personal liability clause. Standard in all my contracts. Mason looked. He read. His face went white. You tricked me, he whispered. You set me up. I protected my investment, I corrected him. Just like I protected you for 40 years. But protection is over. Now comes the bill. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. You asked me how it felt to be a loser. I said my back to him. I turned around. I smiled. So tell me, son, how does it feel to be evicted by the man you tried to starve? Mason stared at me. He looked small. He looked weak. He looked like a boy who had just realized the monster under the bed was real, and it was wearing his father's face. You can't do this, he pleaded. We're family. Family eats at the table, I said coldly. Freeloaders eat outside. I pressed a button on my desk. Security, I said. Escort Mr. King out of the building and make sure he doesn't take the stapler. 2 large men in suits walked in. They grabbed Mason by the arms. No, Mason screamed. You can't do this. I'm calling the police. Call them, I said. I own the precinct building too. They dragged him out. His screams echoed down the hallway. I sat back in my chair. I took a deep breath. It was just the beginning. I picked up my phone. I dialed a number. Chloe, I said when she answered. It's Cyrus. I have some news about your husband's financial situation. You might want to sit down. The war had moved to the second front, and I was bringing the artillery. I gave you a choice, Mason, I said, standing up. I offered you a way out. I offered you a chance to walk away with your dignity, but you chose the hard way. Mason laughed. You are trying to intimidate me. You think I am scared of you. You are 73 years old. I could break you in half. The double doors to the office swung open. Mason spun around. 2 men walked in. They were not the regular building security. They were my personal detail. Jackson and Stone. Both were former special forces. Jackson was 6'4" and built like a tank. Stone was smaller, but he had eyes that looked like they had seen things no man should see. They wore black suits that fit perfectly over their muscles. Mr. King Jackson said, his voice deep and rumbling. Is there a problem, sir? Mason looked at them. He looked at me. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. These men did not look like actors. They looked like consequences. Who are these guys? Mason asked, stepping back. These are the people who escort trespassers off the property, I said. Mason tried to puff out his chest. He tried to look authoritative. I am not a trespasser, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I am the tenant. I run the restaurant downstairs. You can't touch me. Jackson stepped forward. He moved with a deceptive speed for a man his size. He stopped inches from Mason. The owner has revoked your access, sir, Jackson said. You have been asked to vacate. Mason poked Jackson in the chest. A mistake. Don't you touch me, he yelled. Do you know who I am? I am Mason King. I am a VIP in this city. If you lay a hand on me, I will have your badge. I will have your job. Jackson didn't blink. He looked at the finger poking his chest like it was an annoying insect. Mr. King, Jackson asked, looking over Mason's shoulder at me. Instructions. Remove him, I said. Mason turned to me. Dad, stop this. Tell them to back off. This isn't funny anymore. I walked around the desk. I stood in front of him. I was old, yes, but I stood tall. You are right, Mason, I said. It isn't funny. It hasn't been funny for a long time. You served me dog food. You laughed at me. You threw me away. And now you are standing in my office tearing up my contracts. I nodded to Jackson. Get him out of here. Do not be gentle. Jackson grabbed Mason's arm. It wasn't a hold meant to restrain. It was a hold meant to control. He twisted Mason's arm behind his back and marched him toward the door. Ow! Mason screamed. You are breaking my arm. Let go. Dad, help me. I watched them drag him out. Stone followed close behind, picking up the torn pieces of the contract and shoving them into Mason's pocket. Keep this, Stone said. You might need to read it later. They dragged him down the hallway. I followed at a distance. I wanted to see this. I needed to see this. They reached the elevator. They shoved him inside. I stepped in with them. Mason was pressed against the wall by Jackson. He was sweating profusely. His eyes were wide with shock. You are crazy, he panted, staring at me. You are actually crazy. You hired goons to beat up your son. They aren't goons, Mason, I said calmly as the elevator descended. They are professionals, and they aren't beating you up. They are escorting you. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. It was lunchtime. The lobby was full of people, businessmen, clients, and some of Mason's own staff who were confused about why the restaurant was closed. Jackson and Stone marched Mason out. They didn't hide it. They walked him right through the center of the atrium. People stopped. They stared. They saw the great Mason King, the man who bragged about his wealth and his connections, being frog-marched by security like a common shoplifter. Let me go, Mason yelled, struggling. You are embarrassing me. Everyone is looking. That is the point, Mason, I said, walking behind him. I wanted them to see. I wanted the world to see the Emperor without his clothes. They reached the front doors. Jackson pushed them open. He shoved Mason out onto the sidewalk. Mason stumbled and fell to his knees on the concrete. His expensive suit pants tore at the knee. Stay off the property, sir, Jackson said. If you return, you will be arrested for criminal trespassing. Mason scrambled to his feet. He brushed off his knees. He looked around. People on the street were filming with their phones. He was going to be viral again, but not in the way he wanted. He looked at me standing in the doorway, flanked by my guards. You will pay for this, he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You will pay for this, old man. I am going to ruin you. I am going to take everything you have." I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. He turned and ran toward his car, or what was left of his car. It was parked illegally in the loading zone. A parking enforcement officer was just placing a ticket on the windshield. Mason ripped the ticket off and threw it on the ground. He got into his car and slammed the door. He peeled away tires, screeching, leaving a cloud of smoke behind him. I watched him go. I felt a heavy sadness in my chest. It wasn't regret. I knew I had to do this. But it was the sadness of a father watching his son choose the path of destruction over and over again. Mr. Kingstone said, "Are you all right, sir?" "I am fine, Stone," I said. "I am just tired." I turned to go back inside. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. It wasn't Mason. It was my lawyer, Mr. Gold. I answered. "Hello, Abe," I said. Cyrus Abe said, his voice urgent. "We have a development." "What is it?" I asked. "It is about the audit," Abe said. "The forensic audit you asked me to run on Mason's restaurant accounts." I walked to a quiet corner of the lobby. "What did you find?" I asked. "It is worse than we thought," Cyrus Abe said. "He isn't just bad with money. He is criminal. We found transfers. Huge transfers. Hundreds of thousands of dollars moving from the restaurant's operating account to offshore shell companies, and then moving back into personal accounts under Chloe's name." "Chloe," I said. "His wife." "Yes," Abe said. "It looks like money laundering, Cyrus. They were washing money, probably from loan sharks or illegal gambling. I don't know the source yet, but the pattern is clear." I closed my eyes. It wasn't just incompetence. It was greed. Criminal greed. "Did you report it?" I asked. "I had to," Abe said. "As an officer of the court, I couldn't sit on this. I flagged it with the bank. I sent a suspicious activity report to the Treasury. And I asked. And the bank just acted," Abe said. "They froze everything. The joint accounts, the business accounts, even their personal savings. It is all locked down pending a federal investigation." I hung up the phone. I looked out the glass doors at the street where Mason had just fled. He thought he was having a bad day because he got kicked out of a building. He didn't know that his entire life had just been put on ice. Just then, across town, in the living room of a mansion that Mason was struggling to pay for, Chloe's phone rang. She was sitting on the sofa, filing her nails, waiting for Mason to come back and tell her he had fixed everything. She picked up the phone. It was her personal banker. Mrs. Sterling, the banker, said, his voice cold and formal. "Yes," Chloe said. "What is it?" "I am busy. Mrs. Sterling, I am calling to inform you that we have placed a total freeze on all accounts associated with you and your husband." Chloe dropped her nail file. "What?" she shrieked. "Why?" "We have received a notification regarding suspicious activity," the banker said. "Specifically allegations of money laundering and fraud. Federal regulators have ordered a hold on all assets." "Fraud." Chloe screamed. "Who told you that?" "The report came from the majority stakeholder of the holding company that underwrites your business loans," the banker said. "Who is that?" Chloe demanded. "Who is the stakeholder?" "A Mr. Cyrus King," the banker said. Chloe dropped the phone. It hit the carpet with a thud. Cyrus. The old man. The janitor. He hadn't just kicked them out. He hadn't just taken the building. He had just dropped a nuclear bomb on their life. I stood in the lobby of my building. I put my phone in my pocket. The first domino had fallen. Now I just had to watch the rest of them crash. The lights in the mansion were flickering. Not because of a storm, but because the power company had sent a final notice that morning and the check Mason had written had bounced harder than a rubber ball. Chloe sat on the edge of the imported silk sofa, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone screen. She wasn't scrolling Instagram anymore. She was scrolling through her bank accounts, and every single one of them showed a balance that made her want to scream. 0. Frozen. Pending investigation. She looked up as Mason paced the room. He was a wreck. His suit was rumpled, his tie was gone, and he smelled of stress, sweat, and desperation. He was on the phone again, yelling at someone who clearly wasn't listening. "I don't care about the policy," he shouted. "I need to liquidate the assets now. It's my money." He listened for a second, then threw the phone across the room. It bounced off the wall and landed on the rug. "Useless," he spat. "They're all useless. The bank says my accounts are flagged for suspicious activity. Suspicious activity because of him. Because of that old man." Chloe didn't say anything. She just looked at him. For 5 years she had looked at Mason and seen a golden ticket. She saw the cars, the parties, the status. She saw a man who could give her everything she had ever wanted without her having to lift a finger. But tonight, looking at him pacing in a dark room with the power about to go out, she saw something else. She saw a failure. "So that's it?" she asked, her voice cold. "We're just going to lose everything because you can't handle your father." Mason spun around. "Handle him. He owns the building, Chloe. He owns the bank. He's not a janitor, he's a monster. He's smarter than you," she said. It wasn't an insult, it was a fact. He played you, Mason. He played us both. And now we're the ones looking like idiots. "I'm fixing it," Mason yelled. "I have a meeting tomorrow, a new investor. He's going to save us." "Another investor," Chloe scoffed. "Like the last 3, the ones who laughed in your face when they saw your credit score?" She stood up. She walked over to him. She didn't touch him. She just looked at him with eyes that were devoid of love or respect. "You promised me the world, Mason," she whispered. "You promised me a life of luxury. And look at us. We're about to be evicted from a house we don't own, driving a car that's about to be repossessed, eating leftovers because we can't afford takeout." "It's temporary," he insisted. "I'll fix it." "You can't even fix a leaky faucet," she sneered. "Your father was right. You are useless." She turned and walked away. She went upstairs to the bedroom. She needed to think. She needed a plan. And she was starting to realize that her plan couldn't include Mason. When she entered the bedroom, she saw a package on the bed. It wasn't there when she left. It was a large black box tied with a gold ribbon. It looked expensive. It looked like the kind of gift she used to get before everything fell apart. She walked over to it. She hesitated. Who would send her a gift now? She untied the ribbon. She lifted the lid. Inside was a suitcase, a Louis Vuitton carry-on. The leather was soft, the monogram unmistakable. It was beautiful, and inside the suitcase was an envelope. She opened it. A plane ticket, first class, one way, to Paris, leaving tomorrow night, and a note. She recognized the handwriting. It was neat, blocky, precise. It was the handwriting of a man who had signed thousands of invoices. "Chloe, you are a woman of taste. You deserve better than a man who serves dog food to his father. You deserve better than a man who loses everything because of his own ego. Mason is sinking. You don't have to drown with him. Paris is beautiful this time of year. Start over. Find a man who can actually afford you. You know what to do." A friend. Chloe stared at the note. Her heart was pounding. It was from Cyrus. He knew. He knew exactly who she was. He knew she wasn't loyal. He knew she was a survivor. And he was offering her a life raft. She looked at the ticket. Paris. Shopping on the Champs-Élysées. Dinners in Montmartre. A life without Mason's panic, without his failures, without the shame of being poor. She looked at the empty suitcase. It was a symbol. It was waiting to be filled. She walked to the closet. She opened the doors. Her designer clothes, her shoes, her handbags. They were the only assets she had left. She could sell them. In Paris, there were consignment shops that paid cash. She could start over. She heard Mason downstairs yelling at the automated service of the electric company. He sounded pathetic. She made a decision. She took the suitcase. She started packing. Not everything. Just the best pieces. The Hermes bags. The Chanel jackets. The diamond earrings Mason had bought her with money he probably stole. She moved quietly. Systematically. She was stripping the house of its value one item at a time. She wasn't just leaving Mason. She was liquidating him. She found his watch collection in the drawer. Rolexes, Patek Philippe's. He loved those watches. He said they were investments. She swept them into the bag. "Investments?" she whispered. "Cashing out." She heard footsteps on the stairs. Mason was coming up. She zipped the bag shut. She shoved it under the bed. She threw the note and the ticket into her purse. Mason walked in. He looked defeated. "The power company gave us until Friday," he muttered. "I bought us some time." He sat on the bed. He put his head in his hands. "I'm sorry, babe," he said. "I know this is hard, but I promise I'll make it right. We're a team, right?" Chloe looked at the back of his head. She looked at the man she had married for better or for worse. "Yeah," she said, her voice flat. "We're a team. She walked over to the mirror. She fixed her hair. She put on a smile. It was the same smile she used for her Instagram photos. Fake, bright, empty. "I'm going to take a bath," she said. "I need to relax." "Good idea," Mason said. "I'll go downstairs and check the mail. Maybe there's a check." He walked out. Chloe waited until she heard his footsteps fade. Then she pulled the suitcase out from under the bed. She opened her jewelry box. She took the wedding ring off her finger, a 3-carat diamond. She dropped it into the bag. "Sorry, Mason," she whispered. But survival of the fittest. She zipped the bag again. She had 24 hours. 24 hours to bleed the rest of the accounts dry, pawn the silver, and get to the airport. Cyrus was right. She deserved better, and she was going to get it, even if she had to steal it from her own husband. The rat was leaving the sinking ship, and she was taking the lifeboats with her. I sat in the back of a black sedan with tinted windows parked across the street from the lobby of the St. Regis Hotel. I was watching a live feed on my tablet from a camera hidden in the flower arrangement on table 4. The feed showed my son Mason sitting on the edge of a velvet armchair nervously adjusting his tie. He looked like a man who was trying to sell a drowning victim a glass of water. His suit was pressed, but it was the same one he had worn for 3 days. His eyes were darting around the room, scanning every face that walked through the revolving doors. He was waiting for a miracle. I had arranged the miracle. His name was Julian Vance. To the world, Vance looked like the eccentric billionaire investor from Silicon Valley. He wore a linen suit, no socks, and a watch that cost more than a house. In reality, Vance was an actor I had hired from a local theater troupe. A very expensive actor who specialized in playing the role of the shark. Mason was desperate. Since the eviction, since the freezing of his accounts, since Chloe had started looking at him with hatred instead of adoration, he had been scrambling. He needed cash. He needed liquidity to pay off the vendors, to pay off the staff, to pay off the lifestyle he was addicted to. He had been rejected by every bank in Atlanta. His credit score was radioactive. So when Vance's assistant, which was actually my lawyer's secretary, called him and said that the Orion Group was interested in a distress injection of capital, Mason had bitten the hook so hard he swallowed the line. I watched Vance walk into the lobby. He played the part perfectly. He walked with an arrogant stride, ignoring the staff talking loudly into a Bluetooth earpiece. He sat down opposite Mason and didn't offer a hand to shake. Mason King Vance said, his voice bored. "You have 5 minutes. I have a jet waiting on the tarmac." Mr. Vance, Mason stammered. "Thank you for seeing me. I have a proposition. The elite is a gold mine. We are just having a temporary cash flow issue due to a supplier dispute." Vance waved his hand, dismissing the excuse. "I do not care about your suppliers," Mason Vance said. "I care about assets. I care about equity. My analysts tell me your brand has value. Distressed value, but value." He pulled a checkbook from his jacket pocket. He placed it on the table. $2 million, Vance said. Mason stopped breathing. I saw his eyes fixate on that checkbook. It was the answer to every prayer he had ever whispered. It was his salvation. $2 million, Mason whispered. That would solve everything. Vance opened the checkbook. He picked up a gold pen. "Here is the deal," Vance said. "I am buying a 40% stake in your future earnings, and I am providing a bridge loan to clear your current debts. $2 million. Cash. Today." "Yes," Mason said, his voice trembling. "Yes, absolutely. Where do I sign?" Vance held up a hand. "Not so fast, kid. High risk, high reward. I need collateral. I need to know you have skin in the game. I don't have much right now," Mason admitted. "My cash is tied up. I don't need cash," Vance said. "I need physical assets, real estate, vehicles, anything unencumbered." Mason hesitated. He knew the house was gone. He knew the cars were gone. But he also knew that if he didn't get this money, he was dead. So he did what he always did. He lied. "I have a house," Mason said. "A mansion in Buckhead. It is worth $5 million. And a G-Wagon. And a Porsche." I watched on the screen. My heart hardened. He was pledging assets he did not own. He was committing fraud right there in the lobby of the St. Regis. He was digging his grave deeper with every word. Vance smiled. It was a predatory smile. "Excellent," he said. "I had my team draw up a standard security agreement. It puts a lien on all your personal property. House, car, watch, clothes. If you default, I own everything down to your socks." "I will not default," Mason said, confident in his lie. Vance slid a thick stack of documents across the table. "Sign here, here, and here, and initial the back page." Mason didn't read a word. He didn't check the interest rate. He didn't check the repayment terms. He didn't check the name of the holding company listed as the lender. He just grabbed the pen and signed. He signed his name over and over again, signing away his life for a promise of rescue. He finished. He pushed the papers back. Vance checked the signatures. He nodded. "Done," he said. He tore the check out of the book. He handed it to Mason. Mason took it. His hands were shaking. He stared at the zeros. $2 million. He looked like he wanted to kiss the paper. "Thank you," Mason breathed. "You have no idea what this means." Vance stood up. He buttoned his jacket. "Do not make me regret it, Mason," he said. "My collection team is aggressive." Vance turned and walked away. He walked out of the lobby and into the waiting car that I had paid for. Mason sat there alone. He held the check to his chest. He closed his eyes. He let out a long, shuddering breath of relief. He thought he had won. He thought he had outsmarted the world. He thought he could take this check, deposit it, and buy his way back into the kingdom. I tapped the screen on my tablet, switching the feed. Mason stood up. He walked toward the exit, feeling the weight of the check in his pocket. He felt lighter. He felt powerful again. He walked out onto the street. He pulled out his phone to call Chloe, to tell her he was a genius, to tell her he had fixed it. But before he could dial, a notification popped up on his phone. An email. It was from the Orion Group. Subject: executed contract copy. Mason frowned. He opened the email. He opened the attachment. He scrolled to the bottom to see his signature. It was there. Then he scrolled back to the top. To the header he hadn't bothered to read in the meeting. Lender King Distressed Assets, LLC, a subsidiary of Cyrus King Enterprises. Mason stopped walking. People bumped into him on the sidewalk, but he didn't notice. He stared at the screen. King Distressed Assets. He looked at the check in his hand. He really looked at it this time. It was drawn on a bank called First King Mutual. He looked at the terms of the contract he had just signed. Clause 1, immediate transfer of title. Upon signature of this document, the borrower agrees to transfer immediate ownership of all listed collateral to the lender, including but not limited to any real estate vehicles and personal effects listed in Schedule A. Clause 2, confession of judgment. The borrower acknowledges that any misrepresentation of ownership regarding said collateral constitutes immediate default and fraud. Mason's knees buckled. He grabbed a lamppost to hold himself up. He hadn't just borrowed money. He had confessed to fraud in writing. He had pledged assets he didn't own to a company owned by his father. And the check. He looked at the check again. There was a note written in the memo line in small print. For deposit only to the account of King Foods Distribution. It wasn't a check for him. It was a check to pay off his debt to my food distribution company. The money he owed for the steaks and the lobster he had served for years without paying. He held a piece of paper that moved $2 million from one of my pockets to the other. He had signed away his freedom for a receipt. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." He looked around wildly. He looked for Vance. He looked for the car. They were gone. He was standing on the street corner holding a worthless piece of paper that proved he was a criminal. My phone rang. It was Mason. I answered. "Hello, son," I said, my voice cheerful. "You set me up," he screamed. People turned to look at him. "You set me up, you old bastard. This check, it is worthless to me. It is worth $2 million, Mason," I said. "It clears your debt with my warehouse. You should be happy. You are debt-free with King Foods. I need cash," he yelled. "I need money to live. I signed over everything. You signed over things you didn't own." "Mason," I said, my voice dropping the cheerfulness, "you committed fraud, again, and now I have it in writing. Notarized." "Why are you doing this?" he sobbed. "Because you need to learn," I said. "You need to learn that there is no such thing as easy money. You need to learn that when you sign a contract, you read the damn words." "I am going to the police," he said. "I am going to tell them you tricked me." "Go ahead," I said. "Show them the contract where you pledged a house you don't own. See how that conversation goes." Mason hung up. I watched him on the street camera. He ripped the check into pieces. He threw them into the gutter. He had nothing. He had less than nothing. He had a confession of guilt in his pocket and a wife at home waiting for a miracle he couldn't deliver. I signaled my driver. "Take me home, James," I said. The lesson was getting harder. but it had to be done. Mason was stripping himself bare, layer by layer, his arrogance, his greed, his lies. Soon there would be nothing left but the man underneath. And I was terrified that when we finally got there, we would find out there was no man at all. But I had to try, because he was my son, and even a broken tool can be fixed if you have enough heat and enough pressure. I closed my eyes. Tomorrow would be the hardest day yet. Tomorrow I would take the roof off. The banging on the front door didn't sound like a guest. It sounded like a judgment. It was 8 in the morning on a Tuesday. The sun was streaming through the high windows of the mansion in Buckhead, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Inside the house, Mason and Chloe were sleeping the deep, exhausted sleep of people who believe they have cheated fate. Mason was clutching the carbon copy of the loan agreement he had signed yesterday, the one he thought had saved his life. He thought the $2 million had hit his account. He thought he was back on top. He didn't know that the money had never touched his personal account. He didn't know that it had gone straight to pay off the debts he owed to my distribution company. He didn't know that he was waking up with a zero balance and a signed confession of fraud in his pocket. I wasn't in the house. I was parked across the street in my black sedan watching the show through the tinted windows. I sipped my coffee. It was black and bitter, just like the lesson I was about to teach. The banging came again, louder this time. Open up. Sheriff's Department. I saw the bedroom light flick on. A few moments later, Mason appeared at the front door. He was wearing a silk robe that I had paid for, his hair messy, his eyes bleary. He opened the door, ready to yell, ready to throw his weight around like he always did. "Can I help you?" he barked at the man standing on the porch. "Do you know what time it is?" The man was a deputy sheriff. He was big, broad-shouldered, and he didn't care about Mason's silk robe. Behind him stood 4 other men in work clothes holding empty cardboard boxes. A moving crew. "Are you Mason King?" the deputy asked, consulting a clipboard. "I am," Mason said, puffing out his chest. "And I am going to have your badge for disturbing my peace. You are being evicted, Mr. King," the deputy said calmly. He handed Mason a thick packet of papers. "You have 15 minutes to collect your personal essentials, medication and legal documents only. Everything else is now the property of the landlord to cover back rent and damages." Evicted Mason laughed. It was a high, nervous sound. "You have the wrong house, officer. I own this house. My mother left it to me." The deputy didn't blink. He just pointed to the document. "The deed to this property is held by King Real Estate Holdings, LLC, the deputy said. "The owner, Mr. Cyrus King, has filed an immediate order for removal of unauthorized squatters. The judge signed it this morning." Mason froze. He looked at the paper. He looked at the name. Cyrus King. "My father," he whispered. "That is impossible. He is a janitor. He doesn't own real estate. He lives in the guest room." "He owns the block, sir," the deputy said, pushing past Mason into the foyer. "Now please step aside. My men have a job to do." The movers swarmed in. They moved with the efficiency of termites eating a frame. They started grabbing things: the vase in the hallway, the paintings on the walls, the expensive rugs. "What is going on?" Chloe screamed from the top of the stairs. She was wearing a satin nightgown, her face a mask of sleep and expensive creams. "Who are these people, Mason? Why are they taking my things?" "Make them stop," Chloe yelled, running down the stairs. "That is my Ming vase. Put it down." "Ma'am, please step outside," the deputy said, blocking her path. Mason looked at his wife. He looked at the empty walls where his trophies used to hang. The reality was crashing down on him like a collapsing roof. The house wasn't his. It never was. I had bought it 10 years ago under the LLC. I had let them live there rent-free because I wanted them to have a good start. I wanted them to build a life. Instead, they had built a shrine to their own arrogance. "It is," Dad Mason whispered. His face was gray. "He owns it. He owns it all, Chloe." "What do you mean he owns it?" Chloe shrieked, grabbing Mason by the lapels of his robe. "He is a bum, Mason. You told me he was a bum. You told me we were rich." "I thought we were," Mason stammered. "I thought the check yesterday, the investor." "The investor was him?" Chloe screamed, shaking him. "Don't you get it, you idiot? The investor was him. The landlord is him. The supplier is him. He has been playing us. He has been playing us the whole time." She looked around the foyer. The movers were carrying out the sofa, the white leather sofa she loved more than she loved her own husband. "Do something," she yelled, pushing Mason away. "Stop them. Call your lawyer. Call the police." "I am the police lady," the deputy said. "And you have 5 minutes left." Mason stood there paralyzed. He looked at his hands. The hands that had never done a day of hard work in their lives, the hands that had served me dog food just 4 days ago. He realized then that he had nothing. The car was gone. The money was gone. And now the roof was gone. He turned to Chloe. His eyes were pleading. "We can go to a hotel," he said, his voice trembling. "Just for a few days. Until I figure this out." "With what money?" Chloe spat. "Your cards are declined, Mason. Your accounts are frozen. We don't even have cash for a cab." She looked at him with pure, unadulterated hatred. The mask of the loving wife had fallen away, revealing the mercenary underneath. "You did this," she hissed. "You and your ego. You had to humiliate him. You had to serve him dog food. If you had just shut your mouth and let him live in the guest house, we would still have this. We would still be living like royalty. But no, you had to be the big man." She poked him hard in the chest. "And now look at us. We are homeless. Because of you." "I didn't know," Mason cried, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't know he had money. You should have known," she screamed. "You are his son. How could you not know your own father was a tycoon? You are stupid, Mason. You are useless. Just like you said he was." She turned to the deputy. "Can I take my clothes?" she asked, her voice shifting instantly to a seductive purr. "Please, officer. They are all I have." "Essentials only," the deputy repeated. Chloe ran back upstairs. Mason tried to follow her, but the deputy stopped him. "Outside, sir. Now." Mason stumbled out onto the front porch. He was barefoot. The morning air was chilly. He stood on the welcome mat, the one that said, "The Sterlings." He watched as the movers carried his life out box by box. He looked across the street. He saw my car. He saw me sitting in the back seat. Our eyes met. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked broken. He looked like a child who had lost his mother in a crowd. "Dad," he mouthed. I opened the car door. I stepped out. I was wearing my work clothes, my old gray Dickies trousers and my steel-toed boots. I wore a flannel shirt and a canvas jacket. I looked exactly like the man he despised. I walked across the street. My boots crunched on the gravel. I walked up the driveway past the moving truck, past the sheriff's cruiser. I walked right up to the porch steps. Mason cowered. He actually shrank back against the doorframe. He thought I was going to hit him. He thought I was going to scream. I didn't. I just stood there looking at him. Chloe came running out of the house, clutching a handful of dresses and a jewelry box. She stopped when she saw me. "Otis," she gasped. "Otis, please, tell them to stop. This is a mistake. We are family." I looked at her. I looked at the diamond earrings she was wearing, earrings bought with money Mason had stolen from my company. "Family doesn't steal," I said. "Family doesn't mock." "Otis." "I am sorry," she cried, dropping the dresses. "It was Mason. He made me do it. He made me treat you that way." "I love you, Otis. I always respected you." "Liar," Mason shouted. "You called him a dirty old man. You told me to kick him out. You said he smelled like cabbage and poverty." "Shut up!" Chloe shrieked at him. They stood there turning on each other like rats in a bucket. It was pathetic. It was exactly what I expected. I raised my hand. Silence. They both stopped. They looked at me. They were waiting for me to save them. They still thought that because I was a father, because I was old, I would be soft. I walked back to my truck, which James had parked behind the sedan. I reached into the bed. I pulled out a bundle. It was green nylon rolled up tight and tied with a string. I walked back to the porch. Mason watched me. "What is that?" he whispered. "Is that money? Is that a bond?" I threw the bundle at his feet. It hit the porch with a soft thud. He looked down at it. It was a tent, a cheap 2-person camping tent from Walmart. He looked up at me confused. "What is this?" he asked. I looked him in the eye. The memory of the dog food on the silver platter flashed in my mind, the laughter of his guests, the shame he tried to put on me. "You asked me where I was going to live." I said, my voice steady and hard as granite. "You told me to go find a bridge. You told me I was a freeloader." I pointed to the tent. "This is what freeloaders get, Mason." "Dad, please," he sobbed, falling to his knees. "I am sorry. I will do anything. Just let us stay, even in the guest house. I will sleep on the floor." "The guest house is closed," I said. "The main house is closed. The bank is closed." I kicked the tent toward him. "There is a nice park about 3 miles from here," I said. "It has a public restroom. If you hurry, you can get a good spot near the gazebo before the other homeless people take it." Dad. Don't call me Dad, I said. You lost that right when you served me Alpo. I turned to Chloe. And you, I said, you have a choice. You can stay with him in that tent, or you can go back to your parents. But I suggest you leave the jewelry. It belongs to the company now. Chloe looked at Mason kneeling on the ground in his robe. She looked at the tent. She looked at me. She didn't hesitate. She dropped the jewelry box on the porch. She stepped over Mason. She walked down the driveway without looking back. Chloe. Mason screamed. Chloe, don't leave me. She kept walking. She walked right out of his life. Mason was alone. He looked at me. He was shivering. Why are you doing this? He whispered. Why do you hate me? I don't hate you, son, I said. I am teaching you. Teaching me what he cried. I am teaching you what it feels like to be hungry, I said. I am teaching you what it feels like to have nothing but your name. Because right now, Mason King is a name that isn't worth the mud on my boots. I turned around. You have 10 minutes to get off my property, I said, walking away. Or the sheriff takes you to county for trespassing. I got back into my car. I watched him through the window. He picked up the tent. He hugged it to his chest like a life preserver. He stood up on shaky legs. He walked down the driveway barefoot, his silk robe dragging in the dirt. He was heading for the park. He was finally going to learn what it meant to be a man. He was going to learn it the hard way, the way I did, from the bottom up. I signaled James to drive. The house was empty. The rats were gone. Now it was time to rebuild. But first, I had to make sure he stayed down long enough to understand why he fell. I picked up my phone. I dialed my security chief. Follow him, I said. Make sure he doesn't get comfortable. And make sure he eats. But don't give him steak. Give him what he gave me. I sat in the executive suite of King Foods Distribution watching the rain streak against the floor-to-ceiling glass. It was quiet up here. The kind of quiet that money buys. The kind of quiet that lets you think. Down below in the city, my son Mason was likely trying to figure out how to set up a tent in the mud. He was learning the first lesson of survival, but I knew the war wasn't over. Mason was the loud enemy. He was the one who barked. But the real danger, the real poison in my family had always been the one who whispered. Chloe. I knew she was coming. I knew it the moment I saw her walk away from Mason in the driveway, leaving him kneeling in the dirt. A woman like Chloe does not walk away into oblivion. She walks toward the next opportunity. She is a parasite, and a parasite cannot survive without a host. She had sucked Mason dry, and now that he was a husk, she was looking for fresh blood. And I was the biggest vein in the city. The intercom on my desk buzzed. Mr. King, the receptionist said. There is a woman here to see you. She says she is your daughter-in-law. She says it is an emergency. She is crying, sir. I swiveled my chair around. I looked at the heavy oak door. Send her in, I said. I didn't stand up when she entered. I sat there like a statue, my hands folded on the desk. Chloe burst into the room. She looked like a tragedy. Her hair was wet from the rain, her makeup was smeared, and her designer dress was ruined. She looked like a woman who had just escaped a burning building. It was a good performance, almost Oscar-worthy. Oh, Cyrus, she sobbed, running toward my desk. Thank God you are here. She threw herself into the chair opposite me. She grabbed a tissue from the box on my desk and dabbed at her eyes. I am so sorry, she wailed. I am so sorry. I didn't know. I swear to you, Cyrus, I didn't know. I didn't say a word. I just watched her. I wanted to see how far she would go. I wanted to see the depth of her deception. Mason, she continued, her voice trembling, he is a monster. He forced me. He made me treat you that way. He threatened me, Cyrus. He said if I didn't go along with his plan, he would leave me. He said he would take everything. I was terrified. I was a prisoner in my own home. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and pleading. You have to believe me. I always loved you. I always respected you. When he served you that dog food, my heart broke. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stop him, but I was afraid. I leaned back in my chair. You were afraid, I asked. Yes, she nodded frantically. He has a temper. You know how he is. He is unstable. And today when we got evicted, I saw his true colors. He blamed me. He tried to hit me, Cyrus. That is why I left. I couldn't stay with a man who would treat his own father like that. She reached across the desk. She tried to take my hand. I pulled it away. She didn't flinch. She just kept talking. "I want to make it up to you," she said. "I want to be the daughter you deserve. Mason is gone. He is dead to me. But we are still family. Let me take care of you. Let me cook for you. Let me manage the house. I can be your assistant. I can help you run the business. I have a degree in marketing, Cyrus. I can be useful." I listened to her pitch. It was smooth. It was calculated. She was offering me a trade. Her loyalty for my money. She thought I was a lonely old man who was desperate for connection. She thought that because I had discarded Mason, I would be looking for a replacement. She thought she could charm the old janitor. I opened the drawer of my desk. I pulled out a remote control. "You say Mason is a monster?" I said, my voice calm. "He is," she said. "He is evil. And you say you were loyal," I said. "You say you were a prisoner." "I was," she sobbed. "I was faithful to him, Cyrus. I stood by him through everything until today. I was a good wife. A good wife," I repeated. I pointed the remote at the large flat-screen television mounted on the wall to her left. "Let us see," I said. I pressed the button. The screen flickered to life. The video was high-definition, crisp, and clear. It was dated 3 weeks ago. It wasn't a video of Mason. It wasn't a video of the restaurant. It was a video of the interior of a gym, a private gym, the kind that costs $200 an hour. Chloe froze. Her sobbing stopped instantly. Her eyes locked on the screen. On the video, Chloe was there. She was wearing tight workout clothes. She wasn't working out. She was standing in the corner of the room with a man. He was tall, muscular, and very young. He was her personal trainer. And they weren't stretching. They were kissing. Passionately. Aggressively. Chloe gasped. She put her hand over her mouth. The audio kicked in. I had excellent microphones installed by my private investigator. "I can't wait to leave him," Chloe's voice said on the screen. "He is such a loser. He thinks he is a big shot, but he is drowning in debt. His restaurant is a joke." The trainer laughed, nuzzling her neck. "Then why do you stay, babe?" "For the inheritance," Chloe said. "His old man is going to kick the bucket soon. Mason thinks the old guy is broke, but I went through his papers. There is money somewhere. Once Mason gets it, I am going to divorce him, take half, and then we can go to Cabo." "You promise?" the trainer asked. "I promise," Chloe said. "I despise him. He is weak. Not like you." The video continued, but I pressed pause. The image froze on Chloe's face mid-laugh, mocking the husband she had just claimed to fear. The silence in my office was deafening. The only sound was the rain hitting the glass and the shallow, terrified breathing of the woman sitting across from me. I looked at her. Her face had gone pale. The color had drained away, leaving her looking like a wax doll melting in the heat. "You filmed me," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "You had me followed." "I protect my investments, Chloe," I said. "And my son, despite his flaws, was an investment. I knew he was weak. I knew he was foolish. But I needed to know if the people around him were the cause or the symptom." I stood up. I walked around the desk. I loomed over her. "You were the disease," I said. Chloe scrambled backward in her chair. "No," she stammered. That was just talk. I was venting. It didn't mean anything. It meant everything I said. You didn't leave Mason because he was cruel. You left him because he was broke. You left him because the gravy train derailed. And now you are here in my office trying to buy a new ticket." I leaned down. My face was inches from hers. I could smell the fear on her. "You called me a leech," I said. "You stood in my garage and told me I was nothing. You filmed me eating dog food and put it on the internet for likes. I was confused," she cried. "You were not confused," I roared. "You were hungry. You are a predator, Chloe. You eat whatever is weak. You thought I was weak. You thought you could walk in here, shed a few tears, and I would hand you the keys to the kingdom." I walked to the door. I opened it wide. "Get out," I said. Chloe stood up. She looked at the door. She looked at me. She realized the act was over. The mask fell away. Her face twisted into a sneer of pure hatred. "You are a miserable old bastard," she hissed. "You deserve to be alone. You and your stupid son. You deserve each other." I pointed to the hallway. "A woman like you," I said, my voice low and hard. "A woman who betrays her husband, a woman who mocks her elders, a woman with no honor and no loyalty." I looked her up and down with disgust. A promiscuous woman like you has no door to enter the house of King. She flinched at the word. It cut deeper than any curse. It stripped away her pretense of class. You will regret this, she screamed. I will sue you. I will tell everyone you are a voyeur. Tell them I said. Tell them I watched you betray my family. Tell them I have the tape. Go ahead. She stared at me. She knew she had lost. She grabbed her purse. She marched toward the door. I hope you rot, she spat as she passed me. I watched her walk down the hallway. Her heels clicked on the marble floor, a hollow, empty sound. I waited until she turned the corner. Then I slammed the door. I walked back to my desk. I sat down. I felt tired. My bones ached. I picked up the remote and turned off the TV. The image of her betrayal vanished into the black screen. I had cleared the house. I had evicted the son. I had banished the daughter-in-law. I was alone, but the air in the room felt cleaner, lighter. I picked up the phone. I dialed Chen. It is done, I said. She is gone. Chen asked. She is gone, I said. She won't be coming back. And Mason? Chen asked. Mason is still in the park, I said. My men are watching him, Good Chen said. What is the next move? The next move is patience, I said. Hunger is a slow teacher, Chen. We have to let it do its work. I hung up. I looked out the window again. The rain was stopping. The clouds were breaking. Mason was out there, cold, alone. He had hit rock bottom. Now he had to decide if he was going to stay there or if he was going to climb. But he was going to have to climb without ropes, without shoes, and without me. I closed my eyes. The easy part was tearing it down. Now came the hard part, waiting to see if anything worth saving would grow from the ashes. The engine of the Audi A4 sputtered and died a quiet death in the dark alleyway behind 4th Street. It was out of gas. It had been running on fumes for 2 days, just like its owner. Mason sat in the driver's seat, gripping the leather steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. This car was the last thing he had. It was the last remnant of the life he used to live, the life where he was a CEO, the life where he wore Italian suits and drank vintage wine. Now it was just a cold metal box that smelled of stale sweat and despair. I wasn't in the car with him, but I knew exactly what he was feeling. I had my security team tracking the vehicle. I knew the repo order had been issued that morning. The tow truck was already prowling the neighborhood looking for the VIN number. Mason had maybe an hour before he was walking on the pavement. He looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. The face staring back at him was gaunt. His beard was patchy and unkempt. His eyes were hollowed out by 3 days of barely eating. He reached into the passenger seat and rummaged through the empty fast food bags, hoping to find a fry that had fallen between the cracks or a half-eaten burger he had missed. He found nothing but crumbs. He licked his finger and pressed it against the wrapper, trying to catch the salt. It was pathetic. It was tragic. And it was exactly what he needed. His stomach growled a loud, painful sound that echoed in the small space. He was starving. Not the kind of hungry you feel when you skip lunch. The kind of hungry that makes your hands shake and your vision blur. The kind of hungry that makes you forget your pride. He looked out the window. Across the street, there was a building with a warm yellow light spilling out onto the sidewalk. A line of people stood outside, huddled in coats and blankets. Above the door, a sign read, St. Jude's Community Kitchen. Mason looked at the sign. He looked at the people. In his old life, he would have crossed the street to avoid them. He would have called the police to complain about the vagrants ruining the property value. He would have sneered at their misfortune. But tonight, he didn't see vagrants. He saw steam rising from bowls. He saw bread. He saw survival. He opened the car door. The cold wind hit him, cutting through his wrinkled shirt. He didn't have a coat. He had left it at the house when the eviction team threw him out. He shivered violently. He locked the car out of habit, not realizing that by the time he came back, it would likely be gone. He walked across the street. He kept his head down, pulling his collar up, trying to hide his face. He was terrified someone might recognize him. He was terrified that one of his old business partners or a former employee might drive by and see Mason King standing in a soup line. He joined the back of the queue. The man in front of him smelled of alcohol and old rain. The woman behind him was talking to herself. Mason shrank into himself, trying to make his body as small as possible. He told himself this was temporary. He told himself he was just gathering strength to make a comeback. He told himself he was still better than them. He was wrong. He was exactly where he belonged. I was standing behind the serving counter inside the kitchen. I wore a white apron over my work clothes and a hairnet covering my gray hair. The kitchen was loud, filled with the clatter of pots and the chatter of volunteers. The air smelled of beef stew and fresh bread. It was a good smell, an honest smell. I owned this building. I funded this kitchen. For 20 years, I had come here twice a week to serve food to the people who had fallen through the cracks. It was my way of giving back. It was my way of remembering where I came from. I saw him come in through the door. He looked like a ghost. He was shuffling his feet, his eyes fixed on the floor. He grabbed a plastic tray from the stack. He moved down the line. He took a napkin. He took a plastic spoon. He didn't look up at the servers. He was too ashamed. He just held out his tray, waiting for the ladle to drop the stew into his bowl. He moved closer. He was 3 people away, 2 people away. My heart hammered in my chest. This was my son, my flesh and blood. He looked broken. Part of me, the father part, wanted to jump over the counter and hug him. I wanted to take him to a steakhouse. I wanted to fix it. But the other part of me, the part that had been served dog food on a silver platter, held me back. If I fed him stew now, he would eat it and forget the hunger. He would think he had gotten away with it. He would think the world owed him a hot meal. I couldn't let that happen. The lesson wasn't finished. Mason stepped up to my station. He still didn't look up. He just thrust his tray forward, his hand shaking. "Please," he whispered. His voice was raspy. "Just a little more broth, please." I didn't move. I stood there holding the ladle. The silence stretched out. The line stopped moving. Mason frowned. He sensed something was wrong. He slowly lifted his head. His eyes met mine. For a second, he didn't recognize me. He saw an old black man in a hairnet and an apron serving soup. He saw a servant. But then he looked closer. He saw the eyes. The eyes that had watched him grow up. The eyes that had watched him throw his life away. "Dad." He breathed. The word hung in the air between us. He blinked rapidly, as if he was hallucinating. "Dad," he said louder. What are you doing here?" "I am working, Mason," I said calmly. "Something you should try sometime." He stared at me. He stared at the pot of stew steaming in front of me. He looked around the kitchen. He saw the staff treating me with respect. He saw the manager nod at me. You work at a soup kitchen," he stammered. "I run this kitchen," I said. "I pay for the food, I pay for the lights, I pay for the heat that is keeping you warm right now." Mason's face crumbled. The arrogance, the confusion, it all melted away, leaving only naked hunger. "Dad, please," he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "I am starving. I haven't eaten in 2 days. I have no money. The car is out of gas. Please, just give me a bowl." I looked at him. I looked at the bowl in his hand. "You are hungry?" I asked. "Yes," he sobbed. "Yes, I am hungry. I am sorry, Dad. I am so sorry for everything. Just feed me. Please." I reached under the counter. I had prepared for this moment. I knew he would come here eventually. It was the only shelter in his zip code. I pulled out a silver bowl. It wasn't plastic like the others. It was a heavy stainless steel mixing bowl. I placed it on his tray. It wasn't empty. Inside was a mound of brown, chunky meat. It smelled strong. It smelled of rendered fat and processed grain. Mason looked at it. He froze. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with horror. "What is this?" he whispered. I leaned over the counter. I looked him dead in the eye. "This is high protein, Mason," I said, my voice carrying the weight of a judge passing sentence. "It is good for your joints." He shook his head, backing away slightly. "No," he whimpered. "No, Dad, you can't." "You served this to me on my birthday," I said. "You told 60 people that this is what freeloaders eat. You told me it was good enough for a useless old man." I pointed at the bowl. "Well, Mason, now you are the freeloader. You are the one with no job, no home, and no money. You are the one begging for a handout." I pushed the tray toward him. "Eat up, son," I said. "It is on the house." The people in line behind him started to murmur. They didn't know the backstory, but they saw the cruelty. They saw a father serving dog food to his son. Mason stared at the bowl, his stomach cramped with hunger. He was so hungry he could probably eat it. He was so hungry he was considering it. And that was the moment that broke him, the realization that he had fallen so low that dog food looked like an option. He looked at me. He looked for mercy. He looked for a smile that said, "Just kidding." He found nothing but stone. "You are a monster," he screamed, his voice cracked. "You are evil. How can you do this to your own son?" "I didn't do this to you," I said. "You did this to yourself. You cooked this meal, Mason. Now you have to taste it." He grabbed the bowl. For a second I thought he was going to throw it at me. I tensed, ready to dodge. But he didn't. He couldn't. He was too weak. He threw it on the floor. The wet meat splattered across the linoleum. The silver bowl clattered and spun, echoing in the shocked silence of the kitchen. "Keep your garbage," he yelled. "Keep your charity. I would rather die than eat from your hand." He turned around. He pushed his way through the line, knocking over a woman who was waiting for her soup. "Watch it, man," someone shouted. Mason didn't stop. He ran for the door. He burst out into the night, back into the cold, back into the darkness. I stood there watching the door swing shut. The kitchen was silent. The volunteers were staring at me. "Mr. King," the manager said softly. That was necessary," I said. I picked up a rag. I walked around the counter. I knelt down on the floor and started to clean up the mess my son had made. I didn't let anyone help me. I wiped up the meat. I picked up the bowl. I threw it in the trash. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was hot and salty. I loved him. God help me, I loved him. And that is why I had to let him starve, because until he knew what it felt like to be truly empty, he would never be able to be full. I stood up. I washed my hands. "Get back to work," I told the staff. "People are hungry." I went back to the line. I picked up the ladle. I served the next person. A young mother with tired eyes. I gave her extra bread. But my mind was outside in the dark with Mason. He was angry now. He was humiliated. And when a man like Mason is angry and humiliated, he makes mistakes. He was going to lash out. He was going to try to hurt someone. And when he did, the final trap would snap shut. I finished my shift. I took off my apron. I walked out to my truck. I checked my phone. There was a notification from the security team. Target is on the move. He is heading toward the alley on 5th. He looks agitated. I started the engine. The night wasn't over. Mason had refused the dog food. Now he was going to find out what happens when the dogs get really hungry. The plastic bowl hit the linoleum floor with a sickening thud, sending chunky brown gravy and processed meat splattering across the pristine white tiles. The sound was like a gunshot in the crowded community kitchen, silencing the murmur of voices and the clatter of spoons. Mason stood there, his chest heaving, his face twisted in a mask of rage and humiliation. He looked at the mess he had made, then at me, standing behind the counter, my face a stone wall of indifference. "I won't eat this filth," he screamed, his voice cracking. "I am Mason King. I am not a dog." He turned to the line of people behind him, men and women who had waited hours for a hot meal, people whose clothes were worn thin by the streets, whose eyes held the dull ache of chronic hunger. He pointed a shaking finger at them. "You eat this slop," he yelled. "You let him feed you garbage. Have you no pride? I wouldn't feed this to a rat." The silence in the room shifted. It went from shocked to dangerous. A large man near the front of the line, wearing a faded army jacket and a beard that reached his chest, stepped forward. He looked at the spilled food on the floor. He looked at Mason. "That was good food, man," the veteran rumbled, his voice low and gravelly. "That was hot food." "It's dog food," Mason shrieked, kicking the empty bowl across the room. "Can't you taste the difference? Or have you been eating trash so long you don't know what real food is?" That was the match in the powder keg. The veteran didn't say another word. He just moved. A heavy fist connected with Mason's jaw, sending him stumbling backward into a stack of trays. Another man, thin and wiry, grabbed Mason's collar. "You waste food here," the wiry man hissed. "You waste food when babies are hungry." I watched from behind the counter. My staff looked at me, waiting for the signal to call security to intervene. I held up a hand. "Wait," I said softly. Mason was on the ground now. He was curled into a ball, trying to protect his head as kicks and punches rained down on him. They weren't trying to kill him. They were trying to teach him. They were teaching him the first law of the street: you respect the gift no matter how small. "Get off me," Mason wailed. "Do you know who I am? I'll have you all arrested. I'll buy this building and burn it down. His threats only fueled their anger. They dragged him toward the door. They threw him out into the alley like a bag of refuse. He landed hard on the wet pavement, groaning, his expensive suit now torn and stained with the very food he had rejected. The door slammed shut. The kitchen went quiet again. "Clean it up," I told the staff, pointing to the mess on the floor, "and give everyone double portions tonight." I walked to the back office and watched the security feed from the alley camera. Mason lay in the dirt, clutching his ribs. He was bleeding from a cut above his eye. He was shivering. He tried to stand up, but his legs gave out and he collapsed back against the brick wall. He was alone. Truly, completely alone. For the first time in his life, there was no safety net. No Chloe to lie for him, no investors to charm, no father to bail him out. He sat there for hours as the temperature dropped. He pulled his knees to his chest, trying to preserve body heat. The hunger he had felt before was now a roaring fire in his belly, made worse by the smell of the food he had thrown away drifting out from the kitchen vents. He closed his eyes, and in the darkness of the alley, the memories started to come. Not the memories of his high-flying life, the parties, and the cars. Those felt like a dream, now distant and fading. Instead, he saw a different life. He saw a small kitchen in a cramped apartment. He saw a younger version of me wearing a chef's uniform stained with grease, coming home late at night. He saw me taking off my shoes, wincing from the pain in my feet, but smiling when I saw him. "Daddy, are you tired?" little Mason asked. "Never too tired for you, son," I said, picking him up. He saw the weekends. While other dads were playing golf, I was working double shifts at the warehouse, loading trucks until my back screamed. But every Sunday morning there was a hot breakfast on the table. Pancakes, bacon, eggs, real food. "Eat up, Mason," I would say. "You need your strength. You're going to do big things one day." He remembered the day he got into college. I had saved for 18 years, putting away every spare dollar into a coffee can, then a savings account. I handed him the check for his tuition. It was everything I had. "This is your ticket, son," I told him. "Don't waste it. Be better than me." Mason sobbed in the alley. The tears cut tracks through the dirt on his face. "I wasted it," he whispered to the empty night. "I wasted it all." He realized then that the freeloader wasn't the man who had worked himself to the bone to give his son a future. The freeloader was the son who had taken that future and set it on fire for a moment of vanity. He looked at his hands. They were soft, uncalloused, useless. "I'm sorry, Dad," he moaned. "I'm so sorry." He curled up on the cold ground, waiting for the night to end or for the cold to take him. He didn't care which. Just before dawn, a car pulled into the alley. It wasn't a police car. It was a sleek black sedan. Mason didn't move. He didn't have the strength to run. A man got out of the car. He was dressed in a sharp suit, carrying a briefcase. He looked out of place in the filth of the alley. He walked over to Mason. He looked down at him with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. "Mason King?" the man asked. Mason looked up, squinting against the headlights. Who are you?" "My name is Arthur Gold," the man said. "I am your father's attorney." And Mason tried to sit up. "My father, is he okay?" "Mr. Cyrus King is fine," Gold said. "But he has a message for you." "A message?" Mason asked, a flicker of hope sparking in his chest. Is he going to help me?" Gold opened his briefcase. He pulled out a single white envelope. "He wants to see you," Gold said. "One last time." "One last time," Mason repeated, fear gripping his heart. "What does that mean? Is he dying? Is he leaving?" "It means," Gold said, handing him the envelope, "that the lesson is almost over, and the final exam is about to begin." Mason took the envelope. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold it. "Where?" he whispered. "The hospital," Gold said. "St. Mary's, room 402. "The hospital," Mason gasped. "Is he sick?" Gold didn't answer. He just turned and walked back to the car. "Clean yourself up, Mr. King," Gold said over his shoulder. "You don't want your father to smell the garbage on you when you say goodbye." The car drove away, leaving Mason alone again. He stared at the envelope. St. Mary's. He stood up. His body screamed in pain, but he forced himself to move. He had to get there. He had to see me. He had to tell me he was sorry before it was too late. He started to walk, one step, then another. He was walking toward his redemption, or his end. He didn't know which. But he knew one thing: he would crawl over broken glass to get to room 402, because for the first time in his life, Mason King wasn't running toward money. He was running toward his father. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the private suite on the 4th floor of St. Mary's Hospital. It was a steady, hypnotic rhythm designed to simulate a life hanging by a thread. I lay in the bed, propped up by pillows, my eyes closed, my breathing shallow and deliberate. I was not sick. My heart was as strong as a diesel engine. My lungs were clear. But the IV line taped to my hand was real, even if it was just feeding me saline, and the oxygen cannula in my nose was real, even if I didn't need it. This was theater. It was the final act of a play I had written to save my son's soul. I heard the heavy door swoosh open. The air pressure in the room changed. And then came the smell. It wasn't the antiseptic scent of the hospital corridor. It was a smell I knew well from my days working the sanitation routes in the sticky Georgia summers. It was the smell of old sweat, of garbage juice, of clothes that had been slept in on concrete. It was the smell of the street. "Mr. King," the nurse said, her voice tight with disapproval. "You cannot come in here. This is a sterile environment." "Let him in," I rasped without opening my eyes. There was a hesitation, a shuffling of feet, and then the door closed. I listened to the footsteps approaching the bed. They were not the confident strides of the CEO who had strutted around the elite snapping his fingers at waiters. They were heavy, dragging steps. The steps of a man carrying a burden too heavy for his spine. The footsteps stopped next to the bed. I heard a ragged intake of breath, a sob that was choked back before it could fully escape. "Dad." The word was a broken whisper. It cracked in the middle. I kept my eyes closed. I needed to hear him. I needed to hear the truth in his voice before I looked at him. People can fake a face, but it is much harder to fake a voice when you are standing at death's door. "Dad, are you awake?" I let out a slow, wheezing breath. "He is sedated," Mr. Sterling, Arthur Gold said from the corner of the room. "He collapsed this morning. His heart. The stress. It was too much." Gold was a good lawyer, but he was an even better liar. I heard the rustle of fabric as Mason fell to his knees beside the bed. I felt his hand hover over mine. He didn't touch me. He was too ashamed. He knew he was filthy. He knew he was unworthy to hold the hand of the man he had served dog food to. "I am sorry," he sobbed. "The dam broke." He wept openly, his face buried in the sheets near my legs. "I am so sorry, Dad. I did this. I did this to you." I lay there and I listened. I listened to my son cry for the first time since he was a boy and scraped his knee on the playground. But these weren't tears of pain. They were tears of guilt. "You were right," Mason whispered, his voice thick with mucus and tears. "You were right about everything. I am a loser. I am a freeloader. I took everything you gave me and I threw it away. I spit on your sacrifice." He took a breath, shuddering. "I thought money made me a man, Dad. I thought the suits and the cars and the restaurant made me important. But I was just a costume. Without you, I am nothing. I am just a hungry dog in an alley." He finally touched my hand. His fingers were rough and dirty. His skin was cold. "I don't want the money," he said. "I don't care about the inheritance. I don't care about the building. Keep it all. Burn it. I don't care. Just don't die thinking I hate you. Please, Dad. Wake up. Yell at me. Hit me. Give me another bowl of dog food. I deserve it. I will eat it this time. I swear I will eat it with a smile. Just don't leave me alone." I felt a tear slip from my own closed eye. It tracked hot down my temple into my ear. He wasn't asking for a lawyer. He wasn't asking for a loan. He wasn't asking where the will was. He was asking for his father. He had hit the bottom. He had slammed into the concrete of reality, and it had shattered his ego into 1,000 pieces. The Mason who cared about appearances was dead. The Mason who lived for Instagram likes was dead. The man kneeling by my bed was raw. He was stripped clean. I had broken him. Now it was time to see if he could be fixed. I opened my eyes. The room was dim. Mason's head was resting on the mattress. His back was shaking. His suit, the one he had worn to destroy me, was shredded and stained with grease. He had a black eye and a cut on his cheek that was infected. He looked like a refugee from a war zone. "Mason," I said. My voice was strong, clear, not the voice of a dying man. He froze. His head snapped up. He looked at me with wide, bloodshot eyes. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. "Dad," he whispered, you are awake." I sat up. I reached up and pulled the oxygen cannula out of my nose. I ripped the tape off my hand and pulled out the IV needle. A drop of blood welled up, but I ignored it. "Dad, what are you doing?" Mason panicked, standing up and reaching for me, but stopping short because of his filth. "You need that. You are sick. Mr. Gold, get a doctor." "Sit down, Mason," I ordered. The authority in my voice hit him like a physical blow. He sat back down on the floor. He stared at me, confused, terrified. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. I stood up. I was wearing a hospital gown, but I stood tall. I looked down at him. "I am not sick," I said. Mason blinked. "What?" "I am not sick," I repeated. "My heart is fine. My blood pressure is fine. I am healthier than you are right now." He shook his head, trying to process the information. "But," Gold said, "you collapsed. The stress." "A lie," I said. "All of it. The collapse. The coma. The deathbed. It was a test." "A test," he whispered. I walked over to the window and pulled open the blinds. The afternoon sun flooded the room, illuminating the dirt on Mason's face, the grime under his fingernails. "I needed to know," I said, turning back to face him. "I needed to know if there was anything left inside you worth saving. I needed to know if you were just a greedy shell or if my son was still in there somewhere, buried under the arrogance and the lies." Mason slowly stood up. He wiped his face with his dirty sleeve, smearing the tears and the grime. "You faked it," he said, his voice rising in disbelief. "You faked dying. Do you know what that did to me? Do you know how scared I was? I thought I killed you." "Good," I said. "You should be scared. You should feel that weight, Mason. Because that is the weight of your actions. That is the weight of disrespect." I walked up to him. I was inches away from his face. I could smell the alley on him. It was a terrible smell, but it was also the smell of truth. "You served me dog food," I said. "You threw me out of my own house. You tried to declare me insane. You tried to steal my life's work." "I know," he choked out, looking at the floor. "I know." And yet I continued. "Here you are, not asking for money, not asking for a lawyer, crying over an old man you thought was useless." I lifted his chin with my hand, forcing him to look at me. "You passed the test, Mason." "Barely. But you passed." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. Does that mean you forgive me?" I dropped my hand. "Forgiveness is cheap," I said. "Redemption is expensive. You haven't earned redemption yet. You just earned a chance. A chance for what he asked. A chance to live," I said. "A chance to eat. A chance to be a man." I walked over to the chair where my clothes were piled. I picked up a bundle wrapped in plastic. I tossed it to him. He caught it instinctively. "What is this?" he asked. I pulled on my trousers. I buttoned my shirt. "Open it," I said. He tore open the plastic. Inside was a gray uniform, heavy cotton pants, a work shirt with a name patch that said Mason, and a pair of heavy rubber boots. It was a janitor's uniform. He stared at it. He ran his thumb over the name patch. "You want me to be a janitor?" he whispered. I put on my jacket. I adjusted my collar. "You wanted to eat, Mason," I said. "You wanted a job. You wanted a life." I walked to the door. Gold opened it for me. The restaurant. "The Elite," I said. "I own it now. I fired the cleaning crew this morning. The floors are dirty. The toilets are backed up. The grease traps need to be emptied." I looked back at him, standing there holding the gray uniform like it was a shroud. "The pay is minimum wage," I said. "No tips. No benefits. You start at the bottom. The very bottom. Where you tried to put me." Mason looked at the uniform. He looked at me. "And if I say no," he asked. "Then you can walk back out that door," I said, pointing to the exit. "You can go back to the alley. You can go back to the cold. And you can stay there until you rot." He looked at the door. He looked at the window where the sun was shining. He looked at his hands. He began to unbutton his ruined suit jacket. He let it fall to the floor. He kicked off his Italian shoes. He pulled the gray shirt over his head. It was too big for him now that he had lost so much weight. He looked small. He looked humble. He pulled on the pants. He stepped into the boots. He stood there dressed like the man he had mocked. "I am ready," he said. His voice was quiet, resigned. I nodded. "Good," I said. I walked out of the room. "Follow me," I said. We walked down the hospital corridor. The billionaire in the suit and the son in the janitor's uniform. People stared. I didn't care. He was alive. He was safe. But the easy part was over. Now the work began. I was going to work him until his hands bled. I was going to work him until he understood that the only difference between a janitor and a CEO is opportunity and hard work. He had wasted the opportunity. Now he had to do the work. We got into the elevator. The doors closed. "You smell like trash, Mason," I said, staring straight ahead. "I know, Dad," he said, staring at his boots. "We will hose you down at the loading dock," I said, "before you touch my mop." "Yes, sir," he said. The elevator descended. He was going down. But for the first time in his life, he was heading in the right direction. The loading dock behind the restaurant was slick with morning dew and the residue of last night's garbage pickup. It smelled of sour milk and old vegetables, a scent that used to make Mason wrinkle his nose and fire the busboys. Now he was standing in the middle of it, shivering in his hospital clothes, staring at the bundle in my hands. "Here," I said, thrusting the gray polyester uniform at him. "Put it on." Mason took the bundle. His hands were shaking. He looked at the fabric like it was infected with the plague. It was stiff, cheap industrial-grade fabric, the kind that didn't breathe, the kind that chafed, the kind worn by the invisible men and women who keep the world turning. "Where are we?" he asked, his voice raspy from the crying he had done in the hospital room. "We are at your new office," I said. He looked up. He recognized the brick facade. He recognized the heavy steel door. It was the back entrance to the elite, the restaurant he had run into the ground, the restaurant he used to strut through like a peacock. "Dad," he whispered, "I can't go in there. They know me." "They know the old you," I said. "The one who screamed at them, the one who docked their pay when they were 5 minutes late, the one who fired them when they asked for a raise." I pointed to the door. "They don't know this Mason. They don't know the Mason who sleeps in alleys." "I can't do it," he said, backing away. "Please, Dad. Anywhere else. I will dig ditches. I will clean the sewers. Just don't make me go in there. It has to be here," I said, my voice hard. "You broke this place, Mason. You broke the spirit of the people who worked here. You owe a debt to this building, and you are going to pay it with sweat." I held up a time card. It was blank. "Starting salary is federal minimum wage," I said. $7.25 an hour. No tips. No breaks for the first 4 hours. You eat what the staff eats. You leave when the job is done. $7, he choked out. "That won't even buy a sandwich." "It will buy you a sandwich if you make it yourself," I said. I looked him in the eye. "Do you want the job or do you want the street?" Mason looked at the alley. He looked at the dumpster where a stray cat was picking at a fishbone. He remembered the cold. He remembered the fear of the night. "I will take it," he whispered. He went behind a stack of pallets and changed. When he came out, he looked smaller. The gray uniform swallowed him. The heavy rubber boots clomped awkwardly on the concrete. He didn't look like a CEO anymore. He looked like an inmate. "Good," I said. "Now follow me." I opened the door and walked into the kitchen. It was prep time. The kitchen was alive with the sound of chopping, sizzling, and shouting. I had rehired the old staff, the ones Mason had fired. I had given them raises. I had given them respect. And I had told them that today they were getting a new dishwasher. When Mason walked in, the noise stopped. It rippled across the room like a wave. The sous chef put down his knife. The line cook stopped stirring. The dishwashers turned off the sprayers. Silence. Mason stood in the doorway, his head down, clutching a mop bucket I had handed him. He was trembling. He could feel their eyes on him. "Well, well, well," a voice rang out. It was Marco, the head chef, a big man with burns on his arms and a temper that matched his talent. Mason had fired him 2 years ago for asking for dental insurance. "Look who decided to grace us with his presence," Marco said, walking over, wiping his hands on his apron. "The king himself." The staff laughed. It wasn't a friendly laugh. It was the laugh of the oppressed seeing the tyrant fall. Mason didn't look up. "Mr. King here is going to be helping us out," I said, my voice cutting through the laughter. "He is starting at the bottom." "The bottom," Marco scoffed. "He is lower than the bottom." Marco walked up to Mason. He stood inches from his face. "You remember me, Mason?" Marco asked. "You remember telling me I was easily replaced? You remember telling me my cooking was peasant food?" Mason nodded slowly. "Yes," he whispered. "I can't hear you," Marco shouted. "Yes," Mason said louder, his voice cracking. "I remember." "Good," Marco said. "Because today you are the peasant." He pointed to the corner of the kitchen, to the grease trap. It hadn't been cleaned in a month. It was a metal box set into the floor filled with congealed fat-rotting food particles and gray sludge. It smelled like death. "That is your station," Marco said. "I want it spotless. I want to be able to eat off it, and after that you have the toilets, and after that you scrub the dumpster pad." Mason looked at the grease trap. The smell wafted over to him thick and oily. He gagged. He put his hand over his mouth. "Do not vomit on my floor," Marco warned. "If you vomit, you clean that up too with a toothbrush." Mason looked at me. His eyes were pleading. He was begging me to stop this. He was begging for his father to step in and save him from the wolves. I stood with my arms crossed, leaning against the stainless steel counter. "You heard the chef," I said. "Get to work." Mason stood there for a long, agonizing minute. The staff watched him. They were waiting for him to run. They were waiting for him to quit. They wanted him to quit so they could say he was always weak. Mason looked at the door. He could run. He could run back to the alley. He could run until he died. But then he looked at me. He saw the disappointment that had been in my eyes for 40 years. He saw the judgment, and something inside him snapped. Not a bone, but an ego. He grabbed the handle of the bucket. He walked over to the grease trap. He got down on his knees. The floor was wet and slippery. The rubber boots squeaked. He knelt in the grime. He reached for the lid of the trap. It was heavy. He struggled with it, his soft hands slipping on the greasy metal. "Need some help, Princess?" a dishwasher called out. Mason didn't answer. He gritted his teeth. He pulled. The lid came off with a sucking sound. The smell filled the room. It was horrific. Rotten meat and old oil. Mason retched. He heaved his stomach, convulsing. But he didn't throw up. He swallowed it down. He picked up the scraper. He stuck his hand into the sludge. The kitchen went silent again. This time there was no laughter. There was only the wet slapping sound of Mason scooping out the filth. He worked. He scraped the fat. He scrubbed the metal. He sweated. The sweat mixed with the grease on his face. His gray uniform turned black with grime. I watched him. I watched my son, the man who wore $3,000 suits elbow deep in the waste of the restaurant he used to own. It was brutal. It was humiliating. But it was honest. For the first time in his life, Mason was doing something real. He wasn't moving numbers on a screen. He wasn't lying to investors. He was cleaning up a mess. Marco watched him too. The chef's arms were crossed, his face stern. He didn't offer help. He didn't offer praise. He just watched. After an hour, Mason sat back on his heels. He was panting. His face was streaked with gray. "Is it done?" Marco asked. Mason nodded. "Yes, chef," he rasped. Marco walked over. He inspected the trap. He ran a finger along the rim. "Missed a spot," he said, pointing to a corner. "Do it again." Mason looked at him. I saw the flash of the old anger in his eyes. I saw the impulse to throw the scraper, to scream, to assert his dominance. I held my breath. Mason looked at the spot. He looked at Marco. He picked up the scraper. "Yes, chef," he said. He leaned back into the hole. He scrubbed the corner. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He didn't quit. He stayed on his knees for 4 hours. He cleaned the trap. He cleaned the drains. He cleaned the floor mats. By the time the lunch rush started, he was exhausted. He was covered in filth. He smelled terrible. "Get out of the way," Marco shouted as the orders started coming in. "Dish pit, now!" Mason scrambled to the dish pit. He stood in front of the sprayer, the hot steam hitting his face. The plates came in a never-ending stream. Scraped, sprayed, racked. Scraped, sprayed, racked. His hands turned red from the heat. His back ached. One of the servers, a young woman Mason had once yelled at for wearing the wrong color lipstick, came by with a stack of plates. She looked at him. She looked at his ruined hands. "Hey," she said. Mason looked up, startled. "You missed a spot on that fork," she said. Mason looked at the fork. "Sorry," he mumbled. She didn't mock him. She didn't laugh. She just put the plates down. "Here," she said, sliding a glass of ice water onto the counter. "You look like you're going to pass out." Mason stared at the water. It was just tap water in a plastic cup. But to him in that moment it looked like vintage champagne. "Thank you," he whispered. "Drink it fast," she said. "Before chef sees." She walked away. Mason drank the water in one gulp. He wiped his mouth with his wet sleeve. He looked over at me. I was still standing in the corner watching. He didn't ask for a break. He didn't ask to go home. He turned back to the machine. He grabbed the next rack of dishes. He shoved them in. He pulled the lever. The steam rose up, enveloping him. He was in hell. I knew he felt like he was in hell. But as I watched him find the rhythm, as I watched him put his head down and just work, I saw something I hadn't seen in 40 years. I saw a glimmer of a man. He was hating every second of it. He was in pain. He was humiliated, but he was still standing. I turned and walked out of the kitchen. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't offer a word of encouragement. Encouragement is for people who are trying. Mason was just surviving. I walked out to my truck. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at the back door of the restaurant. He had survived the first shift, but tomorrow was Sunday. Brunch, the busiest day of the week. And tomorrow I was going to make him scrub the toilets during the rush. I started the engine. The braking was almost done. Now we would see if the pieces could be put back together, or if he would crumble into dust. I drove away, leaving my son in the steam and the noise, learning the hardest lesson of all, that the only way up is to start at the bottom, and the bottom is a dirty place. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and the lunch rush at the Elite had finally died down, leaving the dining room in a state of quiet exhaustion. The air smelled of stale wine and cleaning solution. I was in the back office reviewing the inventory logs, but my eyes were on the security monitor. I was watching Mason. He was on his hands and knees in the main dining area, scrubbing a stubborn wine stain out of the carpet. He was wearing his gray uniform, the name patch slightly crooked. He was sweating. His back was aching, I could tell by the way he moved, but he didn't stop. He didn't complain, he just scrubbed. For 6 months I had watched him break himself down and build himself back up. He had lost the arrogance. He had lost the softness. His hands were rough now, calloused from the mop handle and the steel wool. He spoke less. He listened more. He was becoming a man I could almost recognize, but the past has a way of knocking on the door just when you think you have locked it out. The front door of the restaurant opened. The bell chimed a cheerful sound that felt like a warning. I saw Mason look up. I saw him freeze. Walking through the door was Chloe. She looked like $1 million, literally. She was wearing a white power suit that was tailored to within an inch of its life, huge sunglasses and heels that clicked sharply on the hardwood floor like gunshots. She wasn't alone. Walking beside her was a man in a pinstripe suit carrying a leather briefcase. He had the face of a shark that smelled blood in the water. I stood up and walked to the door of the office. I stayed in the shadows. I wanted to see how Mason handled this. Mason stood up slowly, wiping his hands on his pants. He didn't look happy to see her. He looked tired. "Chloe," he said, his voice flat. "What are you doing here?" Chloe took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were cold, calculating. She looked around the empty restaurant. She looked at Mason's uniform. She looked at the scrub brush in his hand. A sneer curled her lip. "Look at you," she said, playing the martyr. "It is pathetic, Mason, really." "I am working, Chloe," Mason said. "Something you should try." The lawyer stepped forward. He placed the briefcase on a table. "Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice smooth and oily, "my client is here to discuss the terms of the divorce settlement, specifically the division of marital assets." Mason laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Assets?" he asked. "Look around you. I am a janitor. I make minimum wage. You want half of my mop bucket. Be my guest." "Don't play games with me, Mason," Chloe snapped. "We know the truth. We know this is all a charade. Your father owns this building. He owns the company. And since you are his only son and heir, you have a claim to that fortune. And as your wife, so do I." I felt my blood pressure rise. She was like a tick that wouldn't let go until it was burned off. She thought she could sue her way into my pocket through him. Mason stepped closer to her. He didn't back down. "My father owes me nothing," Mason said, "and I own nothing. The house is gone. The cars are gone. The accounts are empty. You check them yourself, Chloe. You know there is nothing there." The lawyer opened his briefcase. "We are aware of the current liquidity issues," he said. "However, we are filing a motion to freeze Mr. Cyrus King's assets as part of the marital estate, arguing that the transfer of wealth was a fraudulent conveyance designed to hide assets from my client. We are suing for $50 million. $50 million! The number hung in the air. Mason stared at the lawyer. Then he looked at Chloe. "You are suing my dad," he whispered. "He hurt me, Mason," Chloe said, tossing her hair. "He humiliated me. He ruined my life. I deserve compensation, and you are going to help me get it. I am not helping you do anything, Mason said. Oh, yes you are, she hissed. Because if you don't, I will tell the police about the loans. I will tell them about the signatures you forged. I will tell them everything, Mason. You will go to prison for fraud, and your dad will have to pay to keep you out. It was blackmail, pure and simple. She was threatening to send him to jail to force me to pay her off. I put my hand on the doorknob, ready to storm out there, ready to throw her out myself. But then Mason spoke. Go ahead, he said. Chloe blinked. What? Tell them, Mason said. Call the police. Tell them I forged the signatures. Tell them I lied to the investors. Tell them everything. He took a step forward. He looked tall in his gray uniform, taller than he ever looked in his Italian suits. I am not afraid of prison, Chloe, he said. I have been living in a prison of my own making for years. A prison of debt. A prison of trying to impress you. He looked at the lawyer. You want to sue my father? You have to go through me. I will testify against myself. I will tell the judge I stole everything. I will tell them my father is the victim. I will take the fall for every single dime. But you will go to jail, the lawyer warned, for a long time. I don't care, Mason said. He turned back to Chloe. I would rather rot in a cell for 20 years than let you take one single dollar from the man who actually worked for it. My father built this empire with sweat and blood. You just want to steal it with a lawyer. He pointed to the door. Get out, he said. Take your lawsuit and get out. Chloe's face turned red. You are an idiot, she screamed. You are throwing away millions. We could be rich, Mason. We could have it all back. I don't want it back, Mason shouted. I don't want the life where I have to lie to keep you happy. I am done. He picked up his mop bucket. He turned his back on her. Call the cops, he said over his shoulder. I will be right here cleaning the floor. I felt a lump in my throat. My son. My foolish, arrogant son. He was finally standing up. He was finally protecting someone other than himself. He was willing to go to prison to protect me. It was time. I opened the door and stepped out. Nobody is going to prison, I said, except you, Chloe. They all spun around. I walked into the light. I was wearing my work clothes, but I held myself like the CEO I was. I walked past Mason. I put a hand on his shoulder. He looked at me, his eyes wide. You did good, son, I said quietly. You did good. I turned to Chloe and her lawyer. The lawyer looked nervous. He knew who I was. He knew my reputation. Mr. King, the lawyer stammered. You were just attempting to extort my family, I said, which is a felony, but that is the least of your problems. I reached into my back pocket. I didn't pull out a checkbook. I pulled out a thick envelope. Chloe sneered. What is that? Another eviction notice. No, I said. It is a dossier from my private investigator. I opened the envelope. I pulled out a stack of documents. You see, Chloe, I said, walking toward her, when my son married you, I had my doubts. You seemed too perfect, too polished, too hungry. So I kept digging. It took a few years. You covered your tracks well. New names, new social security numbers. Chloe's face went pale. The arrogance drained out of her, leaving behind a mask of terror. What are you talking about? She whispered. I am talking about Florida, I said. I am talking about a man named Richard Vance. Does that name ring a bell? She took a step back. She bumped into the table. He was a wealthy man, I continued. Older. You married him 5 years ago in Miami. You cleaned out his accounts and vanished while he was in the hospital. Liar, she screamed. That wasn't me. I held up a photo. It was a wedding photo. Chloe looked younger. Her hair was different, but it was her. Standing next to an old man in a wheelchair. And then there was Texas, I said, pulling out another document. A man named Bill Henderson. Oil money. You married him 3 years ago, while you were still married to Vance. I walked closer. She was trembling now. And then you came to Atlanta, I said. And you met Mason. And you married him. I looked at Mason. He was staring at her, his mouth open. She never divorced them, Mason, I said. She is still married to Vance. She is still married to Henderson. I turned back to Chloe. That is called bigamy, Chloe. And combined with the theft, the fraud, and the identity theft across state lines, that is a federal crime. Chloe looked at the lawyer. Do something? She shrieked. He is lying. Sue him. The lawyer closed his briefcase. He backed away. I'm afraid I cannot represent you in this matter, Ms. Whatever your name is, the lawyer said. I have a reputation to maintain." He walked out. He ran out. Chloe stood alone. She looked at the door. She looked at Mason. "Mason, baby," she pleaded, her voice shaking. "Don't believe him. He is trying to separate us. I love you." Mason looked at her. He looked at the woman who had demanded half his life. "You are already married," he said. His voice was full of wonder and disgust. "You were never my wife." "She is a predator's son," I said, "and the hunt is over." I pointed to the front window. Blue lights flashed outside. Sirens wailed. "I called them 10 minutes ago," I said. The door opened. 2 police officers walked in. Behind them were 2 federal agents in suits. Chloe Sterling, an agent asked, or should I say Chloe Vance, or Chloe Henderson? Chloe looked around like a trapped rat. She looked for an exit. There was none. She started to scream, a high piercing sound of pure rage. "It is not fair," she yelled as they grabbed her. "I deserved that money. I earned it. I put up with him for years." They cuffed her. They dragged her out. She was still screaming, cursing me, cursing Mason, cursing the world that hadn't given her what she thought she was owed. Mason watched her go. He watched the woman he had destroyed his life for get shoved into the back of a police car. He looked at me. "She was never mine, was she?" he asked quietly. "No, son," I said. "She belonged to the game, and she just lost." Mason sat down on a chair. He put his head in his hands. "I almost went to jail for her," he whispered. "I almost let her take everything." "But you didn't," I said. "You stood up. You protected the family." He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. "I have nothing." "Dad," he said, "I am a janitor. My wife is a criminal. My life is a joke." I looked around the restaurant. I looked at the clean floors he had scrubbed. I looked at the order he had brought to the chaos. "You have a job," I said. "You have your freedom. And for the first time in a long time, you have my respect." Mason looked at me. He saw that I meant it. "Respect," he repeated. "Yes," I said. "And respect is worth more than $92 million. I reached out and took the scrub brush from his hand. "Go home, Mason," I said. "Take the rest of the day off." "Where is home?" he asked. "I sleep in a room above the kitchen." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a key. It wasn't the key to the mansion. It was a key to a small apartment in a decent building downtown. "This is home," I said. "I rented it yesterday. It is in your name. I paid the first 6 months. After that, it is on you." He took the key. He held it like it was a diamond. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me," I said. "Earn it." He stood up. He hugged me. He smelled of sweat and floor cleaner. It was the best hug I had ever had. I watched him walk out. He walked slow. He walked tired. But he walked straight. The gold digger was gone. The parasite was removed. My son was wounded. But he was healing. I picked up the scrub brush. I looked at the stain on the carpet. There was still work to do. But tonight I would sleep well. And so would he. It had been 6 months since Chloe was dragged out of the restaurant in handcuffs. 6 months since Mason had started working as a janitor in the place he used to own. The seasons had changed. Winter had turned to spring, bringing with it a sense of renewal that seemed to seep into the very walls of the elite. I sat in my usual booth in the back nursing a cup of coffee. I watched Mason. He was no longer the soft, frantic man who had begged me for money. He was leaner, stronger. His gray uniform fit him better now, or maybe he just wore it differently. He moved with purpose. He didn't just mop the floor, he inspected it. He didn't just empty the trash, he organized the recycling. He had taken ownership of the bottom rung of the ladder, and in doing so he had found something he had never possessed before: pride. He finished his shift at 2. He walked over to my booth, wiping his hands on a clean rag. "Mr. King," he said. He didn't call me Dad at work. That was the rule. "Mason," I said. "Sit down." He sat. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. The shadows that had haunted him were gone, replaced by the steady gaze of a man who sleeps well at night because he has nothing to hide. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He placed it on the table between us. "What is this?" I asked. "It's the money," he said. "What money?" "The advance," he said. "The money you gave me for the apartment deposit, the money for the uniform, the money for the bus pass, every cent you fronted me 6 months ago." I looked at the envelope. I knew how much was in there. $3,000. It wasn't a lot to me, but to him, earning minimum wage, it was a fortune. It represented hundreds of hours of scrubbing toilets and scraping grease traps. You don't have to pay me back, I said. I told you that was a gift. I know, he said, but I can't keep it. I can't build a new life on charity, Dad. I have to build it on work. He pushed the envelope closer to me. Take it, he said. Please. It's the only way I can look you in the eye. I took the envelope. It felt heavy, not with paper, but with honor. You've changed, I said. Mason looked out the window at the busy street. I used to think I was special, he said quietly. I thought because I wore a suit and drove a fast car, I was better than everyone else. I thought you were a loser because you got your hands dirty. He looked back at me. Tears welled in his eyes, but they didn't fall. I was the loser, Dad, he said. I was a parasite. I took and never gave anything back. But these last 6 months, they've been the hardest of my life and the best. Why the best? I asked. Because for the first time, he said, holding up his calloused hands, I know what I'm worth. I know that if I lost everything tomorrow, I could survive, I could work, I could rebuild. I don't need a trust fund, I don't need a handout, I just need a chance. He took a deep breath. You were right, he said. Money doesn't make the man, labor makes the man, character makes the man. I'm sorry it took me 40 years to learn that. I stared at him. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment I had prayed for when I served him that bowl of dog food. I had broken him down not to destroy him, but to find the steel underneath the rust. And there it was, shining and strong. I put the envelope in my pocket. I accept your payment, I said. Mason smiled, a real smile, one that reached his eyes. So, I said, what's next? Are you going to be a janitor forever? I don't know, he said. I like the kitchen. I like the food. Marco has been teaching me a few things. Basic prep, knife skills. I'm not bad. I know, I said. Marco told me. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a key. It was a simple silver key on a plain ring. I placed it on the table where the envelope had been. Mason looked at it. He frowned. What is this? Is this for the house? No, I said. The house is gone. Sold it last week to a nice family. Then what is it? It's a promotion, I said. Mason picked up the key. He turned it over in his hands. Follow me, I said. We walked out the back door of the restaurant into the alley where he had once slept in the dirt. Parked next to the dumpster was a vehicle. It wasn't a Ferrari, it wasn't a Porsche, it was a food truck. It was old, dented, and painted a faded white, but the tires were new and the engine hummed with a quiet power. Mason stared at it. A food truck. It's fully equipped, I said. Grill, fryer, fridge. It passed health inspection this morning. I bought it from a guy who was retiring. Mason walked over to it. He ran his hand along the metal side. He looked like a kid looking at a spaceship. It's mine, he asked. It's a loan, I corrected him. Interest-free. You pay me back from your profits, if you make any. I will, he said instantly. I will make profits. It's hard work, Mason, I warned. Harder than being a janitor. You're the chef, the driver, the accountant, and the cleaner. You wake up at 4, you go to bed at midnight, and if it rains, you don't eat. I know, he said. He unlocked the door and climbed into the driver's seat. He gripped the wheel. He looked at me through the open window. Thank you, Dad, he said. Thank you for not giving up on me. I never gave up on you, I said. I just waited for you to show up. He started the engine. It roared to life, a rough, throaty sound. What are you going to call it? I asked. Mason thought for a moment. He looked at the restaurant behind him. He looked at me. The Humble Crumb, he said. I smiled. Good name. Where are you going? He asked. I have a meeting, I said. With a man about a horse. You have prep to do. Yes, sir, he said. He put the truck in gear. He pulled out of the alley slowly, carefully. He didn't speed. He didn't show off. He drove like a man who respected his machine. I watched him go. I watched him turn the corner and disappear into the city traffic. He was 40 years old. He had no house. He had no wife. He had a beat-up truck and a mountain of work ahead of him. But he was rich. Richer than he had ever been. Because he had found the one thing money can't buy. He had found himself. I walked back to my car. James opened the door. "Where to, Mr. King?" "Home, James," I said. I leaned back in the seat. I closed my eyes. The war was over. The rebuilding had begun. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't worried about the future. My son was a truck driver, a cook, a worker, and I had never been prouder. The alarm clock in Mason's small apartment rang at 3:30 in the morning. It was a harsh, metallic sound in the darkness, but he did not hit the snooze button. He did not groan and roll over like the man who used to sleep until noon on weekends. He swung his legs out of bed and planted his feet on the cold floor. His hands were stiff. His back was sore from standing over a grill for 12 hours the day before. But he got up. I sat in my car down the street watching his building. I had been doing this for a week, watching him wake up, watching him walk to the lot where he parked the truck, watching him prep. I was the silent partner in this venture, the shadow that made sure he didn't fall but wouldn't catch him if he tripped. Mason arrived at the truck at 4 a.m. The humble crumb was not a pretty vehicle. It was a 1998 step van that I had bought from a retired plumber and retrofitted with kitchen equipment. The white paint was faded and there was a dent in the rear bumper, but the engine was solid and the kitchen inside was stainless steel perfection. Mason unlocked the back door. He turned on the lights. He started the generator. He began to prep. He chopped onions. He sliced tomatoes. He formed beef patties by hand. He wasn't buying pre-frozen discs from a supplier. He was going to the market himself, haggling for the best cuts, grinding the meat himself. He was doing it the hard way, the right way. At 10 a.m., he drove the truck to Midtown. He found a spot near the construction site of a new high-rise. It was a strategic choice. Construction workers needed calories. They needed good food fast and cheap. They were the people Mason used to ignore. Now they were his lifeline. But he wasn't alone. As he parked and opened the serving window, a bright orange food truck pulled up right in front of him, blocking his visibility. It was wrapped in flashy graphics. The Slider Squad. Loud bass music thumped from its speakers, shaking the pavement. Two men jumped out. They were young, arrogant, and wearing matching branded t-shirts. "Hey, Grandpa," one of them yelled at Mason. "You are in our spot. Move that junk heap before we have it towed." I watched from across the street. I knew these guys. They were part of a corporate chain of food trucks funded by venture capital. They didn't care about the food. They cared about the location and the volume. They were exactly what Mason used to be. Mason leaned out of his window. "This is a public street," he said calmly. "First come, first served." The guy laughed. He walked over to Mason's truck and kicked the tire. "You don't want to mess with us, pal," he sneered. "We have permits you have never even heard of. We know the inspectors. Move. Or we will make you move." Mason didn't flinch. He didn't scream. He didn't threaten to sue. "I am staying right here," he said. The guy spat on the ground. "Have it your way." He went back to his truck. He turned the music up louder. Then he opened his serving window. Free fries with every order, he shouted to the gathering crowd of workers. "Come get the best sliders in Atlanta. Don't eat the garbage from the rust bucket behind us." It was a dirty tactic. They were undercutting him. They were drowning him out. They were insulting his product before he had even sold a single burger. I gripped the steering wheel of my car. I wanted to make a call. I wanted to have their truck booted. I wanted to send the health inspector to check their fridge temperatures. But I sat on my hands. This was Mason's fight. If I fought it for him, he would never know if he could win. The lunch whistle blew. The construction site emptied out. Hundreds of hungry men in hard hats poured onto the sidewalk. They saw the orange truck. They heard the music. They saw the sign for free fries. A line formed at the Slider Squad. It wrapped around the corner. Mason stood in his window alone. No line, no customers. Just the smell of diesel fumes and the thumping bass of his competition. He looked at the line. He looked at his grill. He could have given up. He could have closed the window and driven away. He could have cried about how unfair it was, but he didn't. He turned on his grill. He threw a slab of butter on the flat top. It sizzled loudly. He took a handful of onions he had chopped that morning. He threw them on the heat. The smell wafted out of the truck. It was the smell of caramelized onions, of searing beef, of toasted brioche buns. It was a rich, savory, honest smell that cut right through the exhaust and the cheap frying oil of the other truck. He started cooking. He wasn't cooking for an order. He was cooking for the air. He was sending up a signal. A large man in a yellow vest stopped walking. He sniffed the air. He looked at the long line at the orange truck where the guys were microwaving frozen patties. Then he looked at Mason's truck where the steam was rising from fresh beef. He walked over to Mason. "What smells so good?" the man asked. "The workers' special," Mason said. "Double smash burger, caramelized onions, house pickles, and spicy mayo." $5. $5, the man asked. "That is cheap." "It is fair," Mason said. "I will take one," the man said. Mason worked fast. He smashed the patties, getting that perfect crispy edge. He toasted the bun. He assembled the burger with precision. He wrapped it in simple butcher paper. "Here you go," Mason said, handing it over. The man took a bite. He stopped chewing. He closed his eyes. "Damn," he whispered. "That is a real burger." He turned to his friends who were standing in the line for the orange truck. "Hey guys," he shouted. "Forget that plastic crap. You have to try this. This is the real deal." One by one they stepped out of the line, then 2 by 2, then 10 by 10. The smell of the onions was doing the work. The look on the first customer's face was doing the work. Within 20 minutes the dynamic had shifted. The line at the slider squad had vanished. The line at the humble crumb was 20 deep. The guys in the orange truck were furious. They glared at Mason. They turned their music up even louder, trying to drown out the success. Mason didn't notice. He was in the zone. He was flipping burgers, taking cash, making change. He was sweating. Grease was splattered on his apron. But he was smiling. He was talking to the customers. "How are you doing today, sir?" he asked a young worker. "Stay safe up there on that steel." "Thank you," he said to a woman buying a sandwich. "I appreciate your business." He wasn't looking down on them. He wasn't judging their clothes or their accents. He was serving them. He was feeding them. He was one of them. The orange truck guys tried one last move. One of them walked over with a cup of soda. He pretended to trip. He threw the soda at Mason's serving window. It splashed all over the counter, all over Mason's shirt. "Oops," the guy sneered. "My bad." The construction workers went silent. They stepped forward, forming a wall. They didn't like bullies. And they really didn't like someone messing with their lunch. "You got a problem, son?" The big man in the yellow vest asked, stepping between the guy and the truck. The guy looked at the wall of muscle. He looked at Mason, who was calmly wiping up the soda. "No problem," the guy muttered, backing away. Mason looked at the customer. "Don't worry about him," Mason said. "He is just upset because he forgot the most important ingredient." "What is that?" the customer asked. "Respect," Mason said. The crowd cheered, they clapped, they slapped the side of the truck. Mason went back to cooking. By 1:30 in the afternoon, he was sold out. He hung a handwritten sign in the window. "Sold out. Thank you." The orange truck was still half full of frozen food. They closed up and drove away, defeated by a man with a spatula and a sense of dignity. Mason stepped out of the back of the truck. He sat down on the bumper. He was exhausted. He was covered in soda and grease. He pulled a wad of cash out of his pocket. Ones, fives, tens. He counted it. It wasn't $1 million. It was maybe $400 profit. But the way he looked at that money, it was like he was holding the crown jewels. He put the money in a zippered bag. He took a sip of water. He looked across the street. I was parked in the shade of an old oak tree. My windows were tinted, but I knew he could see the silhouette of my car. He stood up. He nodded at me. Just a small nod, a nod of acknowledgement. I nodded back. He didn't come over. He didn't ask for praise. He got back in his truck. He started the engine. He had to go clean the griddle. He had to go prep for dinner. I watched him drive away. The humble crumb rattled and smoked, but it moved forward. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from social media. I followed a few local food blogs. A post was trending. A picture of Mason's burger. "Best burger in Atlanta," the caption read. $5. Real food made by a real guy. The humble crumb is legit. I scrolled down. There was a video, a clip of Mason serving the customers. He was laughing. He looked tired, but he looked happy. The comments were pouring in. "Where is this truck? I am going there tomorrow. Finally some honest food." I put the phone down. He had done it. He had faced the competition. He had faced the dirty tricks, and he had won. Not with money, not with lawyers, but with quality. He was building a reputation, and a reputation is harder to build than a skyscraper and easier to destroy than a sandcastle. But he was building it on rock this time. I started my car. I followed him at a distance. He was driving toward the warehouse district to restock. I felt a swelling in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. It was pride. Not the hollow pride of seeing him in a magazine, but the deep, solid pride of seeing him work. He was becoming a man, but the test wasn't over. Success is a drug just like money. Now that he had a taste of it, would he revert to his old ways? Would he try to scale too fast? Would he try to cut corners, or would he stay humble? Tomorrow was my birthday, my 74th. 1 year ago he had served me dog food. I wondered what he would serve me tomorrow. I drove home to the penthouse. I sat in my chair and looked at the city. The empire was waiting. The legacy was waiting. But for the first time, I wasn't looking for an heir to take over the money. I was looking for a son to take over the values. And as I watched the sun set over the city, I allowed myself to hope, just a little. The humble crumb was rolling, and so was he. The air in the park was crisp, a clear October afternoon that smelled of fallen leaves and the promise of change. It was my 74th birthday. 1 year ago today, I had been served dog food on a silver platter in a room full of people who laughed at me. 1 year ago, my son had tried to throw me away. Today, there were no silver platters. There were no waiters in tuxedos. There was just a folding table set up under an oak tree covered with a simple checkered tablecloth. The guests were not investors or socialites. They were the staff from the warehouse, the regulars from the soup kitchen, and a few of the construction workers who swore by Mason's burgers. And there was Mason. He was standing by his food truck, the humble crumb. He wasn't wearing an Italian suit. He was wearing his apron stained with grease and flour. His hair was messy, his face was flushed from the heat of the grill, and he looked alive. I walked over to him. He was flipping burgers, his movements precise and practiced. He looked up and saw me. "Happy birthday, Dad," he said, wiping his hands on a towel. "Thank you, son," I said. "I have something for you," he said, "a special order." I tensed slightly. The memory of the last special order was still a scar on my heart. Mason saw the hesitation in my eyes. "Don't worry," he said softly. "No tricks this time, just food." He reached into the truck and pulled out a bowl. It wasn't silver. It was a simple ceramic bowl chipped at the rim. Steam rose from it, carrying a scent that transported me back 50 years. It smelled of roasted beef, root vegetables, and thyme. It smelled like the stew I used to make for him when his mother was working late and it was just the two of us in our tiny kitchen. I remembered Mason said, his voice thick with emotion. I remembered how you used to make it. I tried to recreate the recipe. It took me 3 weeks to get the broth right. He handed me the bowl. "Bo," he said, using the word for father that he hadn't used since he was a child. "This isn't dog food. This is my gratitude." I took the bowl. My hands were shaking not from age, but from the overwhelming feeling in my chest. I took a spoon. I tasted it. It wasn't perfect. It was a little salty. The carrots were a bit soft, but it tasted like love. It tasted like redemption. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had stripped away his ego layer by layer until he found his heart. "It's good," I said. "It's very good." Mason smiled. It was the brightest smile I had ever seen on his face. "I also made a cake," he said. It's a little lopsided. Baking isn't really my thing." He brought out a small chocolate cake. It was indeed lopsided. The frosting was uneven. It looked like something a child would make, but written on top in clumsy white icing were the words, "To the King." I laughed, a real deep belly laugh. "It's beautiful," I said. We sat down at the folding table. We ate the stew. We ate the cake. We talked. Not about business, not about money. We talked about baseball. We talked about the weather. We talked about the future. He told me about his plans to expand the food truck. He wanted to hire some of the guys from the vocational program. He wanted to give them a chance just like I had given him. "I want to build something real, Dad," he said. "Something that lasts." "You already are," I said. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, I looked around at the people gathered there. They weren't there because I was rich. They were there because I was Cyrus. And they were there because they respected Mason. They respected the man who made their lunch. They respected the man who looked them in the eye and said thank you. I realized then that the empire wasn't the buildings. It wasn't the trucks. It wasn't the bank accounts. The empire was this. It was a father and a son sitting on a park bench eating stew out of a chipped bowl. It was the peace of knowing that the line would continue. Not the line of wealth, but the line of character. Mason stood up to clear the table. "I have one more thing for you," he said. "You've given me enough," I said. "No," he said. "This is important." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He handed it to me. "Open it later," he said. "When you're alone." I put it in my pocket. "I have to clean up," he said. "Dinner rush starts in an hour. Go," I said. "Work hard." "I will," he said. He walked back to his truck. He fired up the grill. The smell of onions and beef filled the air again. I walked to my car. James opened the door. "Good party, sir," he asked. "The best, James," I said. "The best." I got in. As we drove away, I pulled out the envelope Mason had given me. I opened it. Inside was a check for $4,250. The exact amount of the dinner bill at the Elite. And a note. Debt paid in full. Love, Mason. I held the check to my chest. I closed my eyes. The books were balanced. The ledger was clean. My son was free. And so was I. The morning of my 74th birthday was clear and bright, a stark contrast to the storm that had raged a year ago. I stood in the conference room of King Foods Distribution, looking out over the fleet of trucks lining up at the loading docks. They were white and clean, with the green crown logo gleaming in the sun. This was my empire, my life's work, and today I was giving it away. I turned away from the window. The room was full. My lawyer, Arthur Gold, sat at the head of the table, a thick stack of documents in front of him. Next to him were the members of the board, serious men and women who had helped me build this company from a single van into a regional powerhouse. And at the far end of the table sat Mason. He looked nervous. He was wearing a simple button-down shirt and slacks, clean and pressed, but far from the designer suits he used to favor. His hands were folded on the table, rough and calloused from a year of hard labor. He looked older, tired, but there was a quiet strength in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He wasn't the boy who demanded a seat at the table anymore. He was a man who knew the value of the chair he was sitting in. "Gentlemen and ladies," I began, my voice steady, "thank you for coming." The room quieted. All eyes were on me. "As you know, I am not getting any younger," I said. "And while I still feel strong, I know that a wise king prepares for the succession while he can still hold the scepter." I looked at Mason. He held my gaze. He didn't look entitled. He didn't look greedy. He looked ready. "Today, I am announcing the restructuring of King Foods Distribution," I continued. "I am stepping down as CEO effective immediately." A murmur went through the room. They knew this day was coming, but hearing it was different. "I am transferring 90% of my voting shares to the King Family Trust," I said. "This trust will be overseen by a board of directors chosen for their integrity and their commitment to our values. The profits from this trust will continue to fund the charitable initiatives we have started. The soup kitchens, the vocational schools, the community gardens." I paused. I saw Mason nod slightly. He understood. The money wasn't for yachts. It was for people. "The remaining 10%, I said, walking toward Mason, "I am transferring to my son." Mason looked up, surprised. 10% of a company worth hundreds of millions was still a fortune. It was more than he had ever expected, especially after everything he had done. But I added, raising a hand, "There are conditions." I picked up a document from the table. It was bound in leather, old and worn. It wasn't a legal contract. It was a recipe book. My recipe book. The one I had started in the army, writing down the secrets of making something out of nothing. "Mason," I said, handing him the book, "this is your inheritance." He took it. He opened the cover. He saw the handwritten notes, the grease stains, the history. "This book contains the formulas for our signature sauces," I said. "The marinades that make our meats famous. The spice blends that our clients rely on. It is the heart of this company, Mason. It is the secret sauce." I looked him in the eye. "And along with this book, I am appointing you as the new Chief Operations Officer of King Foods." The room gasped. COO. It was a huge responsibility. It was the person who ran the day-to-day, the person who made sure the trucks ran on time and the food stayed fresh. But I continued, my voice hard. "You will not have access to the company accounts. You will not have signing authority on the checks. You will earn a salary. A good salary, but a salary nonetheless. Your job is to run the business, not to drain it." Mason stood up. He held the book to his chest. "Dad," he said, his voice trembling. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," I said. "Just listen." I walked over to the window and pointed at the trucks. "You wanted money, Mason," I said. "You wanted the fruit without the labor. You wanted the fish without the net." I turned back to him. "I am not giving you a fish, son. I am not even giving you a net. I am giving you the ocean." I swept my hand around the room, indicating the people, the infrastructure, the legacy. "This is a machine," I said. "A machine that feeds thousands of people every day. It is powerful, it is dangerous, and if you don't respect it, it will crush you. But if you learn to steer it, if you learn to navigate the currents, it will take you anywhere you want to go." Mason looked at the book in his hands. He looked at the board members who were watching him with skepticism. He knew he had to earn their trust. He knew it wouldn't be easy. "I understand, Dad," he said. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't," I said. "Because if you do, the board has the authority to fire you, and then you will be back in the food truck." Mason smiled. It was a genuine smile. "I still like the food truck," he said. "Good," I said. "Keep it running on weekends. Never forget where you came from." I signed the papers. I handed the pen to Mason. He signed with a steady hand. No flourishes, no arrogance, just his name. It was done. The transfer was complete. I walked out of the conference room, leaving him to his first board meeting. I didn't stay to micromanage. I didn't stay to watch. He had to do this on his own. I walked down the hall to my office. I started packing a box. Photos of Rosa, my old Army medals, the first dollar I ever made framed on the wall. Arthur Gold walked in. "So that is it?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "You are really retiring?" "I am," I said, placing a paperweight in the box. "I have a lot of fishing to do, Arthur, and I have a garden that needs tending." He watched me for a moment. "You took a big risk, Otis," he said, putting him in charge. "After everything." I looked at the photo of Mason as a boy, the one I kept on my desk. "He is my son Arthur," I said. "He lost his way. But he found it back. And sometimes the people who have been lost make the best guides because they know what the darkness looks like." I picked up the box. "Besides," I added, winking at him, "I kept the parking garage, just in case." Arthur laughed. "You old fox." I walked out of the office. I walked out of the building. I walked to my truck. I put the box in the passenger seat. I climbed in. I sat there for a moment, listening to the engine hum. It was a good sound, the sound of reliability. I looked up at the building. I saw Mason standing in the window of the conference room looking down at me. He raised his hand in a wave. I waved back. He wasn't the boy who demanded a handout anymore. He was the man who had cleaned a grease trap. He was the man who had served a burger with pride. He was ready. I put the truck in gear and pulled out of the lot. The road ahead was open. The sun was shining. I was 74 years old. I was retired. And for the first time in a long time, I was just Cyrus. And that was enough. The steam rose from the giant stainless steel stockpots, filling the air with the rich scent of rosemary, thyme, and slow roasted beef. It was Thanksgiving morning. The St. Jude's Community Kitchen was buzzing with activity. Volunteers were setting tables. The line outside wrapped around the block. It was the busiest day of the year, and the kitchen was a war zone of heat and noise. But in the center of the chaos, there was a rhythm. There was a dance. I stood at the prep station chopping celery. My hands were old and stiff, but the knife moved with a memory of its own. Next to me stood Mason. He was wearing a white chef's coat that was stained with tomato sauce and flour. He wasn't wearing an Italian suit. He wasn't wearing a Rolex. He was wearing a hairnet and an apron that said Head Chef in Sharpie on the pocket. He moved with a speed and precision that I had never seen in him before. He was tasting the broth, adjusting the seasoning, barking orders to the volunteers, not with arrogance, but with authority. He wasn't playing boss. He was leading. "Dad," he said, handing me a spoon. "Taste this. Tell me what it needs." I took the spoon. I blew on the hot liquid. I tasted it. It was rich, complex, and deeply comforting. It tasted like the soup my mother used to make. It tasted like home. "It needs nothing." "Mason," I said, "it is perfect." He smiled. It wasn't the smarmy shark smile he used to flash at investors. It was a tired, genuine smile. The smile of a man who had been up since 3 a.m. and loved every minute of it. "Good," he said. "Let us serve." The doors opened. The people flooded in. They were the forgotten people of Atlanta, the veterans, the addicts, the mothers who had lost their jobs. The people Mason used to step over on the sidewalk without a second glance. The people he had once insulted in this very room. I watched him as he took his station behind the serving line. I remembered the last time he stood there. I remembered the rage in his eyes when he threw the bowl of dog food on the floor. I remembered the entitlement that radiated off him like heat. That man was gone, dead and buried under the weight of his own mistakes. The man standing there now looked people in the eye. "Happy Thanksgiving, sir," Mason said to an old man in a tattered coat. He ladled a generous portion of stew into the bowl. "Here, let me get you some extra bread. You look like you could use it." "God bless you, son," the old man said. Mason didn't flinch. He didn't wipe his hand after touching the man's sleeve. He just nodded. "God bless you too," he said. I took my place next to him, serving the mashed potatoes. We worked in tandem, father and son. Two men with the same last name and finally the same heart. A woman walked up to the line. She was holding a toddler in her arms. She looked exhausted. "Mr. King," she said, looking at Mason. Mason looked up. I recognized her. She was one of the waitresses he had fired from the elite years ago. "She had fallen on hard times," Sarah Mason said. "It is good to see you. I heard you were running this place now," she said, her voice guarded. "I am trying," Mason said. "How is the baby?" "He is hungry," she said. Mason put down the ladle. He reached under the counter. He pulled out a small wrapped box. It was a cupcake from his food truck. "For the little one," he said, handing it to her. "And for you." He filled her bowl until it was overflowing. "Come back for seconds, Sarah. We have plenty." She looked at him. She saw the change. The hardness in her eyes melted. "Thank you, Mason," she whispered. I watched it all. I felt a lump in my throat that had nothing to do with old age. This was my legacy. It wasn't the buildings I owned downtown. It wasn't the millions in the trust fund. It wasn't the fleet of trucks rolling down the highway. It was this. It was my son becoming a human being. We served for 4 hours straight. My back ached. My feet throbbed. But I didn't want to be anywhere else. I looked around the room. 300 people were eating. They were warm. They were safe. And for a few hours they were treated with dignity. When the last person had been served, we cleaned up. Mason didn't leave the dirty work to the volunteers. He grabbed the mop. He grabbed the scrub brush. He went to the pots and pans. I walked over to the sink where he was scrubbing a roasting pan that was half the size of a bathtub. "Let me get that," I said. "No, Dad," he said. "I got it. You go sit down. You have been on your feet all day." "I am fine," I said. I grabbed a towel and started drying. We worked in silence for a while. The only sound was the rushing water and the clinking of metal. "You know, Dad," Mason said, not looking up from the suds. "I was thinking about what you said." "What did I say?" I asked. "About the ocean," he said. "You said you weren't giving me a fish, you were giving me the ocean." I nodded. "I remember. I think I am finally learning how to swim," he said. I stopped drying. I looked at him. "You are swimming just fine, son," I said. "You are doing more than swimming. You are navigating." He turned off the water. He wiped his hands on his apron. He leaned against the sink and looked at me. "I hated you for a long time," he said quietly. "When I was in that alley, when I was scrubbing toilets, I hated you. I thought you were cruel." "I know," I said. "But you weren't cruel," he said. "You were right. If you hadn't stopped me, if you hadn't broken me, I would be dead. Or worse, I would still be that guy. The guy who serves dog food to his father." He shuddered. "I still have nightmares about that night," he admitted. "I see your face. I see the hurt in your eyes." I put my hand on his shoulder. It was solid muscle now. "That night is gone, Mason," I said. "We are here now." He looked around the kitchen. "This is better," he said. "The food truck, the kitchen. It is real. It is mine. It is yours." I agreed. He smiled. So he asked, "What do you think of the new recipe?" "The stew?" I asked. "Yeah, be honest. Is it as good as yours?" I pretended to think about it. I rubbed my chin. "It needs a little more black pepper," I said. Mason laughed. "I knew it. You can never just say it is perfect." "If it was perfect, you would stop trying," I said. "And a chef never stops trying." We finished cleaning. The kitchen sparkled. It was cleaner than the elite had ever been. We walked out the back door into the cool evening air. The city was quiet. My truck was parked next to his food truck. So Mason said, "What are you doing for the rest of the night?" "Going back to the penthouse." "No," I said. "I am going home." "To the penthouse?" he asked. "To the lake," I said. "I bought a cabin, small place, good fishing." Mason nodded. "That sounds nice. You should come up," I said. "Bring a pole. The bass are biting. I might do that," he said, "when I get a day off." "Which isn't often. The humble crumb is busy." "That is a good problem to have," I said. We stood there for a moment. Two men who had been at war and found peace in the trenches. "Happy birthday, Dad," he said. It wasn't my birthday. My birthday was months away. He knew that. "It is a rebirth," he said, "for both of us." I hugged him. I held him tight. He smelled of soap and sanitizer and honest labor. "I love you, son," I said. "I love you too, Dad." He got into his food truck. He waved. He drove away. I watched him go. I watched the taillights fade into the distance. I was alone. But I wasn't lonely. I got into my truck. I started the engine. I had built an empire of steel and concrete. But today I had built something stronger. I had built a man. I looked at the passenger seat. There was a small box there. Mason had slipped it in when I wasn't looking. I opened it. It was a watch, not a Rolex, not a Patek. It was a simple, sturdy field watch with a canvas strap. Rugged, reliable. On the back there was an engraving. "To the chef. From the dishwasher." I put it on. It felt heavy. It felt right. I drove toward the highway. The city lights blurred in my rearview mirror. I was Cyrus King. I was a janitor. I was a billionaire. But mostly, I was a father. And my work here was done. My son thought humiliating me would make him feel powerful, but he only exposed his own weakness. He served me dog food to mock my poverty, unaware that I owned the very table he sat at. I stripped him of everything not out of vengeance, but out of love. I had to break his ego to save his soul. True wealth isn't what you have in the bank. It is the dignity you carry in your heart and the respect you show to those who pave the way for you. Never bite the hand that fed you, for it might be the only hand willing to pull you out of the abyss. If you enjoyed this story of tough love and redemption, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what you would have done if you were in my shoes. Would you have forgiven him? Until next time, stay humble and keep grinding.